Welcome to the Cycle 365. I am your host, Cody Stauffer, and this is episode 28, recorded on April 8th, 2020. I am joined here by my other hosts,
Jesse Booten.
Simon Villano.
There he is. Yep, there he is over the phone. We got a much better setup, so we should be able to hear Simon a lot better, and he should be able to hear us a lot better. And we got a special episode for you guys this week. We're gonna talk expansion in all of the major sport leagues in America not named Major League Soccer.
Yeah,
because
we'll just say the big four. The big four.
Yeah, the big four
sports.
It's not that soccer isn't important.
And we're joined here by
our special guest.
A guest. John, if you'd like to introduce yourself and why you're here.
Hi, my name is John. I wouldn't consider myself a sports expert, but what I am an expert in is geography. And I think this is important.
So John's going to bring in some geographical insight, and we're going to kind of counter back and forth through teams and maybe even come up with team names depending on how good of an idea we think they are. So we all ready to get to it?
I think first thing we should do is let John give us a little bit about your background, about how you are a geographer and stuff like that, and just tell us what you can bring to the table.
Well, I study geography, and I love looking at the spatial aspects of things in general. But one thing that I think is interesting is the spatial aspect of sports teams, where they are, their influence, and it's also interesting thinking about expansion. The logistics and where you would put them, why you'd put them, where wouldn't you put them, why wouldn't you put them there, just stuff like that. And I think it would be interesting from my perspective because I'm not a sports expert.
All right, and Simon, Jesse, and I will counter with what we know about sports and see if we have points to counter with or even points to agree with you on. So, John, we're going to start in the NFL. What are some of the best places for new NFL teams to go from a geographical perspective?
Well, there are several ways to go about choosing where to put teams. The easiest way is simply looking at filling in the gaps. Where are areas that just don't have teams nearby or that have a large enough market to support teams? And some of the easiest ones to go for are teams that are major cities that used to have teams but don't anymore. And so for me, part of my top 4 expansion teams would be St. Louis and San Diego for that reason. They're very large markets, and their teams did really well there, and they left. So there's an open market. There's room there, and it can make it, in my opinion. The other 2 would be San Antonio and Orlando, also 2 very large cities, and there's also some evidence to back up why those would work very well, in my opinion. Specifically looking at the recent Alliance of American Football League. Simply thinking about
the XFL. The Alliance went out 2 years ago.
I know.
Was last year. Okay, but you're talking about the Alliance? Okay.
Yeah, specifically for San Antonio and Orlando.
Okay.
For the XFL, though, another reason, I guess for a reason to back up St. Louis is that the Battlehawks are doing very well in St. Louis.
Yep.
As far as I know.
No, but I know what you're talking about with the Orlando Apollos,
yes.
I think was their name, in the San Antonio. I almost said Express, but that's the expansion team in
Memphis.
Commanders
is the San Antonio. But and one, you look at the numbers, simply, they did really well. I think I briefly brushed up on the numbers, and Orlando, for their best game, they brought in 30,000 attendance, and which is really good. And also looking at that, you can also see what cities worked well and which ones didn't, just basically looking at that chart, seeing which games people showed up to. And one of those consistently, one of the biggest games, I think, was Orlando versus San Antonio. People came out to support San Antonio. And I think San Antonio, there's a culture there. Texas, culturally, is a football state. There's a lot. Simon, you could probably agree with that.
Oh, yeah, no. San Antonio, they're crazy about it. The most state championships in high school football history come from the San Antonio, Houston area in Texas.
Yeah.
So that's a little nugget there.
Yeah. And, the Texas Triangle just filling out, I think San Antonio, there's a lot of room. They need a team, in my opinion.
Simon.
Yeah.
What did the support look like for the Commanders when the AAF was alive and well? Just from people that back there, were they on board for the Commanders?
Yeah, I'd say so. You know, I mean, obviously they're not like the Cowboys or even really the Texans, but you know, the people in San Antonio are really proud of the teams they have. They don't really have a lot of teams. You know, they have the San Antonio Spurs right now, but like at least as far as I know, that's pretty much it. You know, there's not really much of a college presence there. You know, I mean, I guess you have the University of San Antonio, but nobody really cares about them. And so we've seen, you know, the support in San Antonio in other sports. But when the Commanders came to San Antonio, everyone loved them. But I think it's also, you know, helpful to keep in mind that they were good, too. You know, but that doesn't mean they didn't have a really good home field advantage, because they did. A lot of people in San Antonio, in my opinion, really bought into the Commanders. And, you know, they love the brand. And then they folded, and now they still don't have a team. So I think San Antonio would be a perfect spot, in my opinion.
I definitely agree. I think San Antonio is a prime location. As you said, it basically is an untapped market. I mean, there's a professional baseball or basketball team there, but other than that, there's really nothing there. Like Simon mentioned, the University of Texas San Antonio college is there, but the next closest thing would be Texas State, and that's still up in
Austin.
It's not in Austin, no. It is in
No.
I forgot what it's called, but it's just north of San Antonio, but it's Texas State, so no one really cares about Texas State. But there's just not there's a lot of people there with not a lot of sports to root for.
I think another thing to consider is, Simon, you mentioned that people like the Commanders because they were successful. But thinking back to the Houston Texans, they were an expansion team back in 2002, I believe.
Yep.
And they were really bad out the gate. Yet they still have a pretty strong fan base right now. So I think that just because of the sheer number of people in Texas, it doesn't really matter if the team is... I mean, they can't be bad for, like, ever, but that's the same with almost any team. So I think that they'll be able to garner support and eventually get good as well.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. And, you know, Texas, it's one of those states that it's big enough where you could definitely split it into different areas. And people in San Antonio, like, when they have something to root for, this is just, you know, from my own personal experience, but when they have something to root for, they get behind it, you know. I would love to personally see a Dallas versus San Antonio rivalry, because already as this is just a cultural thing, there is one that exists right now. If you add in football, then that just gets way more intense. Because Dallas and Houston, it's kind of a rivalry, but like nobody really cares. Like, I'll be real, like, Houston people care, and then go outside of that city and nobody really cares. But if you pit a Dallas team versus San Antonio team, like, people will pack the stands, whether it's high school basketball, football, track, soccer, whatever, you know, because they love that. And, you know, there's a lot of, you know, rivalry, family ties that go in there as well, and it gets personal. And I think San Antonio is a perfect spot, you know. I think that's definitely a spot where you would find a loyal, rabid fan base to support a new franchise.
You can even call them the Alamos.
San Antonio Alamos? I kind of like it.
Yeah.
I just thought of that.
Or the
Yeah.
San Antonio Outlaws.
Maybe.
That's copyrighted.
Yeah, no,
Please don't sue us.
I definitely agree that San Antonio would probably be the top of my list as well, of a place to, if we're talking about expansion into a new city. I think that's a great place to go.
So we talked about San Antonio a little bit. John, can you give us some more details on Orlando and why that makes such sense? We obviously know about the Apollos, but what other reasons make sense? And part of my questioning is, there's already 3 teams in Florida.
And I was going to touch on that. It's kind of, I guess, it's one of those on the fence ones, you know, because most of the evidence for why I believe it belongs there is simply because of the Apollos, you know. They packed the stands for the Apollos. I understand that a lot of that had to do with the fact that the Apollos were a very good team, so they were worth rooting for. But as far as I know,
Yeah.
but you're right. It would be an oversaturated market. It ended up being probably the most teams in the state.
Could be right there with California.
Yeah. Well, California, the Raiders are leaving.
True.
So it'd be 3. So they would have the most teams out of any state. So it would be an oversaturated market. So that's why it's kind of one of those. You know what I mean? If anything, it might even be better just to move the Jaguars there. But
That's what I was gonna say.
you know,
I think adding a 4th team to Florida isn't the best idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there aren't many places in the United States that can support 4 teams. I would say Texas is maybe 1, but even 3 might be the max there. I don't think the state of Florida could really be successful in taking a fourth team. But I definitely was going to say, yes, I think it would be more beneficial to move a team like Jacksonville down to Orlando if you're going to move them to really try to revive that franchise. But I don't know how smart putting a fourth team in there is. I mean, I have a few cousins that live in Orlando, and people there are pretty much either Dolphins fans or Jaguars fans, and most of them are Jaguar fans anyways. So, I mean, why not move it down there and just get a better showing for the Jaguars?
I think it'd be an interesting experiment. Maybe have a couple games and played in Orlando, see what happens. Mm-hmm.
I'm not too familiar with Florida and where everything is. So how far is Orlando compared to Tampa Bay, Jacksonville, and Miami?
Orlando it's much closer to Tampa than it is the other two. It's kind of in the center. You mean so of the peninsula? You mean upper center ish area. So that's another thing. That's another consideration. It's very close to Tampa, but if a lot of them already support Jacksonville, you mean as opposed to Tampa, you mean, so maybe that might not be an issue. You mean
one thing that may make this work is Jacksonville is actually one of the teams considering going to London.
Yeah,
they're considering moving, and the owner has showed a lot of interest in
leaving Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm. So whether Jacksonville moves to Florida or whether they move overseas, do you think that spot for Orlando exists, and which one is better?
Well, I think either the Jaguars leave or they just move to Orlando. But I think Orlando needs a team, I think, and it can't exist with Jacksonville in the picture. So either Jacksonville needs to get out or just move there for that to happen. You know, as long as the Jaguars are where they are, Orlando can't happen. So they need to move in order for that to occur.
Yeah, I could definitely see a situation where the Jaguars move to London and then you add a team in Orlando. That could definitely happen.
Yeah.
Simon, do you think that if the Jaguars were to move to Orlando, like I know what I think. Well, I think that they would have to rebrand. I don't think they should be the Orlando Jaguars. What do you think they'd have to do? Do you think they have to clean house if they're doing something like that?
The Florida Jaguars, maybe?
Yeah, I would say so. If they move to Orlando, that is. If they move to like overseas, then I think they just keep it as is. But yeah, I kind of think that they should. Like, I don't know. This is just my way of thinking, but obviously Disney's a huge company, right? And Orlando, is it Disney World or Disneyland?
Disney
World.
One of those are they.
Universal, all that.
Disney World? Oh, okay, whatever. One of them is down there, and I already know the Orlando Magic is sponsored by Disney and whatnot. And I don't know, this is just kind of a dream scenario, but I think it'd be dope, low-key, if Disney, bought a stake in the NFL, and they rebranded the Jaguars. Obviously, it'd have to be something, tough, you know what I mean? But I would like to see, a rebranded Jacksonville Jaguars / Orlando team in Orlando if that was to happen. But I do agree with John that, with where the Jaguars are right now, it kind of, I don't know, it's killing the chances of Orlando football team in the NFL, so.
You heard it here first, folks. Simon is okay with our Disney overlords taking over the NFL next.
I mean, who's to say they weren't going to do that already?
Come on, Simon, you don't want to see you don't want to see the Orlando Princesses play in the NFL? Come on.
Or they could go with the Star Wars team, Jesse. That'd be cool too. But
the Orlando Baby Yodas.
Yeah, or the Orlando Avengers because they own Marvel.
That would actually be tight.
But okay, so that addresses the new cities that we talked about a little bit.
Yeah.
So San Diego, you talked about how we all know that the Chargers shouldn't have left San Diego.
No.
Yeah, they should still be there.
Yeah.
That's obvious just by the number of people that aren't in the seats for Chargers games and just by the uproar that happened from them moving. Mm-hmm. Do you still think that there's room for a San Diego team even with all the teams in LA?
Well, yeah. I mean, LA is a big enough market for itself. I don't know of that many people that are willing to drive all the way to LA for a Chargers game anymore. You know what I mean? I think they supported the Chargers. I think they'll support any team. I don't know, how did the Fleet do? I didn't look that up.
I didn't watch much today.
Yeah.
The Fleet didn't do great in San Diego, but that's because they were very up and down.
Okay.
I would say, like, they didn't really have any memorable players, if I'm being honest. So that was one of the bigger problems there.
Well, I also think that San Diego in general kind of have fair weather fans.
Fair enough.
With
Yeah.
the Chargers, when they weren't good, there wouldn't be as many seats in the stands. But the problem with the Chargers being in LA is that they were good and there weren't people in the stands.
Because the LA doesn't care at all. I don't think LA is a football city. I just frankly don't think so. I think, as big as they are.
I mean, there's been a lot of turnover with LA throughout the years. I mean, the Rams left once, the Raiders left once,
The Rams come back.
the Rams came back. The Raiders had a chance to go to LA, but they didn't. So
I think they made the right choice with Las Vegas, though. I think that's good. We'll get to that.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no, they made the right choice to go to Las Vegas. I don't know. I just think even with the Rams coming back, I think that's more of an identity for LA. So I think that's why most of the allegiance lies within football. I just don't. I personally don't think they care about the Chargers.
I mean, because the Rams had at least been there before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I'm thinking about it is like they went from having no teams to two, and one of those. You're right. The Rams had an advantage simply because one, they're a fairly good team.
At that point, yeah.
And two, they just had that history there, and they already had that identity.
Also, they were there first.
Yeah, and they were there first. I think if the Chargers had gotten there first, maybe
that's
but
different.
they definitely dropped the ball. That's fitting.
Yeah, I didn't really understand the move of the Chargers moving to LA. I thought San Diego was a good market for them. I think what they should have done is instead of, because like they played at a college stadium, they should have just built an actual stadium. That's what they should have done instead of relocating. They should have built an actual stadium and still been the same.
They relocated because I think there are some issues for trying to build a stadium, which is like that happens a lot of the time in the NFL, and that's the same reason that the Rams left, is because it was easier to build a new stadium in LA than it was to update or rebuild the stadium in St. Louis, because of the standards that the NFL holds on stadiums and stuff. Which is obviously something to consider with all of this is the city's willingness. So I think out of everything that you mentioned, I think that San Antonio is the best candidate out of all four that you mentioned, just because, I mean, St. Louis does have the base there, but once again, it's a matter of the city stepping in and also doing its part. Same with the San Diego team and same with the Orlando team. So I'd say as far as city willingness goes, it probably goes San Antonio, Orlando, St. Louis, and then San Diego.
Yeah.
That's how I'd rank it. Does anyone disagree?
San Antonio's one.
San Antonio number one.
Oh yeah.
Orlando two, in the sense that it'd be the easiest to start a team there, just because.
And they have the money too. Orlando has money.
Yeah.
Can I touch on St. Louis real fast? We didn't really talk that much about St.
Oh
Louis.
yeah, St. Louis. Yeah.
I think I've been really wanting to talk about this one a lot because of the Battlehawks. Me and Cody talked about on one of the podcasts while sports was happening during the XFL. One of our recaps, we're talking about how St. Louis had to open up their second deck for fans to come in to watch the Battlehawks because they were that popular. And like I think it shows that St. Louis is still one football team. I still think, obviously, it's the Midwest, Missouri area. Like, they love football, too. It's very close to the South. And I think that the people in that city want a football team. And I think that I guess I'll have one disagreement with you. I think, well, no, you said St. Louis. I would say St. Louis might even be ahead of Orlando in a better place to put a football team. Willingness to have a football team by the city, probably still Orlando ahead of them, but I think a better place to have a football team would be St. Louis than Orlando.
I think it makes sense. Plus, St. Louis, they're a sports culture in the first place anyway. You know, because the Cardinals have a deep history there, and even the Rams, they won a Super Bowl while in St. Louis, and they have the greatest show on turf, being a historical. Like, not every team gets a nickname for a side of the ball, and the St. Louis Rams are amongst one of them. So I think as far as base goes, they'd be a great place. And if they could get the city to either update the stadium that they have, because I think that it's fine, they basically have to get rid of the concrete slabs on the side of the field because people get hurt on it all the time. I mean, like, we've seen it. Cleats don't work on concrete, or they just need to build a new stadium.
I think one thing about St. Louis is that there are obviously political reasons outside of football. St. Louis has a lot of economic troubles. There's a lot of things outside football. But most of the reason why I was recommending St. Louis is similar to what Jesse was saying. It was mostly to do with the fact that the Battlehawks do really well and people come out. You know what I mean? They came out for the Rams and they come out for the Battlehawks. But there are those challenges with St. Louis, economically, politically. You know what I mean? There's a lot of outside factors to it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
and those are things that I was kind of talking about, which is like, politics are a part of expansion teams and they're a part of maintaining teams too. Mm-hmm. So, St. Louis is probably the only place left in the Midwest to expand. You know what I mean? Most of the other Midwest is fairly spread out. You know, the Midwest is very well taken care of with the exception of St. Louis. You know what I mean? When it comes to football.
Anyways, that's all I wanted to say about St. Louis.
Simon, do you have any other thoughts on St. Louis?
Not St. Louis. I wasn't sure if we were going to go into this, but I just wanted to ask your thoughts, John, about a team in Oklahoma City.
I'll get to that.
Home of,
are
we going to get to it?
Yeah, we'll get to it. Yeah.
Okay.
Those are my top four. Those are my top four.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll use this as a moment to transition. Coming up next, John's going to bring up some
Other
kind
teams.
of honorable mention cities that we'll discuss and may have a bit harder of a path to travel, and some international expansion. Mm-hmm. Coming up next.
Welcome back to the Cycle 365. This is episode 28. We just talked about our, the best places to put NFL teams, but we're going to go a little bit deeper in now and talk about some honorable mentions that John had. We have our guest John here still. Expert in geography.
I wouldn't say expert.
Expert in geography.
He's our geography guy.
So we're going to dive into... We're going to dive in a little bit more here to some places that we think could support a football team, but there's definitely more that can be talked about. And we'll also go into the international.
Later,
as
we're
well.
going to international. Yeah. So again,
let's start in the U.S., John.
Yeah. So again, some of these are there are different reasons for all these teams, as I prefaced before. Some of them are just simply filling in gaps and geographic gaps, markets that could support them but don't have any teams nearby, and others are for other reasons. For instance, AAF results or XFL results. Not as much XFL in this one, but anyway, in no particular order, for teams that I think are possible or interesting to think about in the United States would be Portland, Birmingham, Oklahoma City, Memphis, Salt Lake City, and Honolulu.
We'll throw Honolulu into the international,
because Honolulu is so far away. I originally had it in my international one.
Yeah, we'll talk.
Let's
talk about OKC first, because Simon did mention that in the last segment. So give us your reasons of why you think OKC is a good place.
All right. Well, pros for OKC. It's a big market. A lot of people live in OKC. And there's no football team there. It's an open market, open to tap, and they got a sports culture already. They're a strong sports culture. They come out for the Thunder, as far as I know. Yeah, as we have Cody here.
Thunder fans show out. They care. They care.
So they got a sports culture. It's just a matter of fact. They got a sports culture. As for reasons why maybe not, simply because proximity to Dallas. Similar to why you could say San Antonio might not work, Dallas might not like that, tapping into OKC. But I think OKC is a good option, probably number one out of all these. But
I'd agree.
Yeah,
Simon, I want to hear your thoughts on this, because again, you are the one that brought it up in the last segment. So why do you think OKC, or what were you thinking about with OKC?
Yeah. First off, John's right. There's really not much you could do out there. There was the GW Zoo, but this is for all my Tiger King fans out there, but that's obviously shut down. And I'm just being honest, they have great fans, and I get the threat of Dallas being there. That's definitely a little bit of a threat, but at the same time, I'm from North Texas, Plano, which is north of Dallas, and so there's a lot of there's a pretty big mix of Texans and Oklahomans there, native-wise, I should say. And people who are from Oklahoma that live in Texas would drive to Oklahoma to watch an Oklahoma football game. Because especially if it's football. Because if I know anything about Oklahomans that live in Texas, oh my God, they love football. And they will antagonize every single Dallas fan you could find. And they're so annoying, but they love it, and they're insane about it. And so I don't think Dallas would be that much of a threat because, if I'm being honest, Oklahoma and a team in Oklahoma City would draw some fans from Dallas, even from the North Texas area, the DFW area, I should be specific, because there are a lot of people from Oklahoma who do end up moving to Texas, or people from Texas moving to Oklahoma and back and forth. And that's just a natural thing. I think there's a pretty big following in North Texas as it is, if there's not one in Oklahoma already. So I don't think that would be as big of a problem. I think honestly a team in Oklahoma City would thrive, and I could see an awesome Oklahoma City versus Dallas rivalry brewing up, which would be, I won't say it would be just like it, but it would be similar or have the same kind of vibes as Oklahoma Sooners versus UT Longhorns type of football game, and those are intense. So those are just my thoughts, though.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I was going to touch on that coming right off with perfect segue into what I was going to say is why I think OKC would be good to have a team there and why it would thrive in countering the fact that yes, Dallas is there. I think it would actually be a helpful thing, not a hindering thing, because Texas and Oklahoma have such a bitter sports rivalry that I think it would make them thrive. Let's have this Dallas-OKC rivalry, and everyone would love to watch it. It would be a big-time thing. It just basically becomes the Red River Rivalry 2.0. So,
And I think the point I was trying to make about Dallas was not simply because of, I meant football politics, as in Dallas not wanting their market to be, the Cowboys not wanting their market to be eaten into.
I think if anything, a guy like Jerry Jones would actually see this as an opportunity more than anything, because I just think, they already sell out basically their stadium every time, but that being able to market that as a rivalry of sorts, they won't even have to be in the same division, I don't think, for people to pack the stands in Oklahoma or Dallas for an OKC versus Cowboys game.
Then that goes away my only essentially con. In that case, I honestly think OKC could probably be replaced one of the top four.
Yeah, I was about to say OKC is probably an upper echelon expansion team in my eyes.
We can talk about which one maybe later that would replace. But
first, right off my head, I would probably replace Orlando with OKC.
Okay.
Just because, unless the Jaguars move happens, I just think
if the Jaguars don't stay exactly where they are, OKC.
Yeah.
It's a conditional thing with Orlando.
Yeah, but I'm gonna say as of right now, out of the top four, I would take Orlando out and put OKC in. But that's just my opinion.
I totally agree, and I'm totally for it. And being a big Thunder fan, a lot of people in the NBA seem confused, mainly just because I know that a lot of people in the NBA were confused when the Supersonics left for OKC. A lot of people didn't think that the appeal was going to be there, but OKC has suffered some horrible seasons, some of historically the worst NBA seasons ever. But the fans still showed up when they were terrible. And the fans still show out when we traded all of our stars away. And the fans still showed up to a team that didn't have the same identity because they just care that much about the basketball team. I think it'll only be better for the football team.
OKC is not fair weather fans.
No, they're loyal fans for sure.
No.
Yeah, so I think, anyone else got anything on OKC? I think we've
only positives, it seems.
Yeah, we've only talked about how that should be a top four.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about these other ones real fast?
Yeah, let's go ahead. Okay. I'm down to talk about the other ones. Simon, do you have all your thoughts on OKC down?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I do see where you're coming from, John, because say Jerry Jones doesn't think this way. I mean, who's to say he won't do everything he can to try to kill an OKC NFL project? And he does carry a lot of influence, but I mean, I'd still say even then, like, there's a lot of people in the NFL who hate the Cowboys and who hate Jerry Jones and would love to override him on this. So I do get where you're coming from, though. I could see the Dallas Cowboys and Jerry Jones trying to kill an OKC project, kind of similar to what the Washington Redskins were doing back in the day, back in the 60s and 70s. Nobody remembers this, but they were trying to kill the idea of a team in Dallas. And then that happened, and then that ended up being a huge rivalry to this day. So I don't know, but I see where you're coming from, John, with the Cowboys and Dallas being a threat to an OKC franchise.
Yeah, all right.
So what are some other cities you got there, John?
Some interesting ones. Portland. I think Portland's... the thing about Portland is I think they have a sports culture, I believe. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The Oregon Ducks are
that's what I'm saying. The Oregon Ducks, they do well.
Portland area. I mean, also
The Trailblazers do pretty well as well.
Yeah, Oregon State.
Sure.
So I mean, the football teams do well.
And it's a big place, you know. I guess you could argue its proximity to Seattle. You know, like, oh well, they have the Seahawks already. They commute to go see the Seahawks. Why do they need a team, kind of thing? But obviously, I wouldn't say Portland would be anywhere near my first choice, but I do believe that it would be up there with the choice, a viable choice. You know what I mean?
Simon, what are your thoughts on a Portland football team?
Yeah, no, I think it'd be a good choice. I agree that it wouldn't be my first choice, you know, but I think it'd be a solid choice. You know, we've seen like y'all already mentioned, the success of the Portland Trailblazers there and, you know, the Oregon Ducks. And, you know, see, it's interesting because Portland isn't like, I don't know, how do I say this? It's not like your stereotypical crazy sports town, I'd say. Like, they still love their sports teams, but there's definitely kind of a different vibe to it, you know?
Kind of like Denver.
Like, I'd say if you were to think, like, compare, you know, what a potential Portland franchise would look like, I think looking at the Seattle Seahawks is a great example, you know, a great comparison. Because I think the fan base would be like that, very loyal, you know. Maybe not as super rabid, but a very loyal, like, you know, fan base. And I think it is an untapped market there as of now as well. So, yeah, I mean, that's all I got to say, really. It's not my first choice, like John said, but it's a choice. I'd say that. It's a viable choice.
Yeah. I'm gonna agree with the only thing I can say. The only thing that just deters me from that is the relevant location to Seattle. I mean, it's what, like a 3-hour drive. So I mean,
it's definitely. I will say that cities on this list have been closer, specifically Orlando, San Diego, even OKC, San Antonio. Mm-hmm. Definitely closer than Portland and Seattle. But
see, one thing that I have to say, and it's kind of a counterpoint to Simon, is in Seattle, I feel like they really ride for the Seahawks, and like they have a brand of like the 12th man. They sell jerseys for the fans. The fans have their own jersey. Like no one wears number 12 in Seattle, and I just don't think you're gonna get that same kind of atmosphere in Portland.
I think you'll get a good atmosphere, just not that atmosphere.
I think that the identity and loyalty is to the Seahawks.
I'd agree. Mm-hmm. I think it's just tough.
They're the Northwest team.
Yeah, it's tough to. I think it'd be tough. I don't know if it would be a very welcomed team in that area. I don't know how many of the Portland faithful or whatever, if you want to call them that, would be like, oh, we can root for our team now. When, like, who cares? Let's still root for the Seahawks. You know. So yeah, I just think it's such a
it'd be a hard market to break into.
Yeah, it's a very strong brand.
You definitely have to do some polling or something.
Yeah,
to see if people even want it. I think
that's what I would struggle with. But
again, that's what I'm saying. It's not my first choice, but I think it's one that warrants thinking about. You mean?
Yeah. So yeah, that does it for Portland. John, give us what is your next one that we can talk about?
Memphis. I think Memphis is an interesting one to talk about.
Memphis, Tennessee. Cody, you want to start us off with Memphis, Tennessee?
So, we were talking a little bit during the break about this, and you did bring up some good points that...
Well, I guess I could bring up those points. Yeah.
Well, yeah, go ahead and tell us what some of your points were.
Well, Memphis is a big market. It's a big city. And the Express did fairly well there, as far as I know. How did the Express do in Memphis? Simon?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. They did do fairly well fan-wise. Like, people still came out and watched. I mean, their team was trash. They weren't, I'll just be honest, they weren't good at all. Like, they resorted to Johnny Manziel, and then he got a concussion one game into his career there. So, I don't know, it's interesting. They're a loyal fan base, I'd say. Like, I feel like, this is going to sound messed up. They're not used to having sports franchises that are successful there. Like, the Grizzlies obviously did well there, but in terms of football in the AAF, I don't know, I think the fans kind of just expected it, but they still came. And they still came and watched, Memphis Express games. So I think that's just a testament to how loyal this city is to their sports teams.
Yeah, I think the fact that they were trash and they still had good turnout is further bringing home the point that they have a good culture there, one that's willing to support a team, even though the Titans are in Nashville. You mean?
See, and I think that the Grizzlies are a good example of a team that has fans show up whether they're doing good or whether they're doing pretty bad. I guess, what do you guys know about like population density from Memphis in comparison to Nashville?
Well, it's smaller than Nashville, but it's still pretty big. It's about the size of some of the other cities we talked about here.
Just because the Titans aren't known for having like crazy home field advantage. Like they don't sell out the stadium like some of the other NFL teams that we see. So I just don't know what putting another sports team in would look like, and I don't think that they would be a sellout crowd in an NFL stadium.
Not at all.
Because AAF stadiums are smaller, or were, I guess, smaller than NFL stadiums. So I mean, what do you have to think about that? Like Nashville versus Memphis, and can two teams exist in Tennessee? From a football perspective.
I'm not sure if two teams were to exist, but if I'm being honest, let me backtrack. I'm not sure if two teams could exist, but I think if the Tennessee Titans to rebrand low-key and move to Memphis, that would be better for business. Like I know Nashville, like there's a bigger population there, but in general, I'm just gonna be honest. I think that people who live in Memphis or in that kind of area are just generally more loyal to their sports team. Because you could throw it back and look at the University of Memphis. Wait, hold up. Are they the Tigers?
They are, yeah.
The college team?
Memphis Tigers,
yeah. Yeah, and they're pretty successful. Granted, they've had some really good squads in the past, but a lot of people show up. I remember watching the Memphis versus SMU game, and that was wild. There are a lot of people there. And in college football, generally there are a little bit more fans than NFL football. But so anyways, I think it'd be better, low-key, if the Titans moved to Memphis. But if we were to talk about two teams that could survive in Tennessee, it being Nashville and Memphis, I think low-key Memphis will probably have the team that does better, if any. If I'm just being honest. So,
I think, as far as Tennessee being able to support two teams, one kind of comparison I think of is North Carolina. They're very similar sized states with similar populations, but the thing is that North Carolina is kind of centered around the Research Triangle in that Raleigh, Durham, and Charlotte are fairly close together. Memphis and Nashville are a little bit more spread apart, which is why I think there's a better possibility that maybe it could work. But I agree that it would be difficult to make two teams work there, and it'd probably be better just to move the Titans.
I think that I think that a team in Memphis, if we're just comparing and contrasting everything at the same time, I think a team in Memphis makes more sense than one in Portland, personally. Just because I think that there's definitely a football culture that exists in Memphis. We know that a strong, loyal football culture exists in Memphis, and that's just kind of like a way of life too.
Well, it is part of the South. That's football is king down there, so they would be okay. I don't know. I still struggle with. I don't know if they would be able to fill a stadium for sure. I don't think it would, especially if there's two teams in the state of Tennessee. If one team can't even fill the stadium, what should that 2 teams could fill the stadium. So I personally don't think that having 2 teams in Tennessee is the best option. And I also would agree with you guys, and I think that the Titans should probably stay in Nashville. I've been to both recently, and for an extended period of stay. One for coaching and in a football sense, and you can just feel that, like, yes, there's football down there, but I still think Nashville is a place that the Titans need to be. So
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think Memphis is a hard one.
Memphis is a tough one to
But
say.
it's an interesting one. Though.
Yeah.
It's definitely one worth discussing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Memphis. I think definitely if there wasn't a team in Nashville already, Memphis for sure.
Oh yeah, if there was no
Ne-
teams
yeah.
in Tennessee, then yeah.
Nashville kind of complicates it all.
Yeah, and I think, and another thing about the Titans is that they are already a moved team.
Mm-hmm.
They were the Houston
Yeah,
Oilers.
I knew that. Yeah.
So moving teams twice just, I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's conflicting for the fan bases, especially the people in Nashville. They won't go to Memphis games. Memphis people will go to Nashville games
Absolutely.
right now, just because that's where it's always been, as long as they've been in Tennessee. But Nashville people won't go to the Memphis games.
I don't think
So you'll be losing fans, I think.
That's a good
Also-
point. Yeah.
I also want to say that the Titans, as we all saw, are up and coming. I mean, they have a pretty good team, and they're just going to build on it. And they can make a run these next few years. Like,
There's no reason to abandon ship in Tennessee yet.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
in a perfect world, a team in Memphis, but this isn't a perfect world. So
The Chargers would probably do
Sure,
better
yeah.
in Memphis
Then-
than LA.
Yep.
I mean, honestly, any of these options are better than the Chargers being in LA.
Yep.
Even Orlando
yeah,
is probably
yeah.
better than the LA Chargers.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what are some other cities on your list? We'll just try and
Bust
rapid
them.
fire them and then
Yeah.
kind of sort them.
Birmingham, football culture, but obviously would be competing with the already well-established college teams there. Maybe not. Maybe the Irons. I think did okay. How did the Irons do, Simon?
Birmingham. They did really good. I mean, it's Alabama in football. You know,
Mhm.
that, honestly, you really can't go wrong with that. I don't know. I think a team in Alabama would do really well, even with the Crimson Tide or even the Auburn Tigers there. You know, because I mean, let's be real. This is pro football. This isn't college. You know, like there have been teams that have existed. You know, in places where there are some college powerhouses that still thrive. You know, we can look at Georgia, that being one, Louisiana being another one, Texas even. And so I really do think that that team in Alabama would thrive, as shown with the Birmingham Iron. Just, I don't know, they're just crazy about football. And if I'm to make a comparison, I would think, this is just me, but I think an Alabama fan base would be almost comparable to a Dallas Cowboys fan base, you know, like kind of obnoxious, you know, southern, but real passionate about their football team. And I think they would love to adopt an NFL team there, honestly, especially if they're good. If they're good, then, you know, like that's a recipe for success in my opinion.
Well, it's kind of like at first I think like, oh, could Birmingham in itself support a football team? But then that kind of reminds me, it wouldn't be Birmingham's team; it would be Alabama's team. You know?
Yes.
Yeah, Birmingham would just being the city, of course.
Yeah.
And they could be called the Alabama something,
Mm-hmm.
and that would probably even serve better to marketing the team if they were just called the Alabama whatever.
And like obviously, it's also just flat out a kind of desolate market. You know what I mean? You have the Saints, you have the Titans, and you have the Falcons. But Birmingham is kind of in that weird spot. You know what I mean? Or Alabama in general. It's like, who do you support? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like they don't have anybody. You know?
Jesse, what do you think?
I think out of the ones we said besides OKC, of course, on this other list, I think this is probably the number one choice, for me at least. We've seen what the fans are like for the Crimson Tide. So, I mean, like, I think the only counter I would have to it is that Alabama is such a lifeblood of that state, like the Crimson Tide are, I should say, that they kind of have that college football identity. I don't know how, I mean, obviously, I'm sure it would translate, but I don't know how that would translate into a professional football identity. I think it could struggle. It would definitely would work, but I think it would have a very slow start.
I think.
Go ahead.
I think we would see something a bit more like Atlanta, because I'd even say that Georgia is a Bulldog state, but they like football enough where they'll go out and they'll show love to the Falcons. Like, I think Georgia will still be their team of choice, but I think we could see a very similar kind of relationship that way, where it still works pretty well.
Atlanta is also just a stupid big city.
That's
With a
what
lot of
I was
people.
going to say. You can't really compare the city of Atlanta to the city of Birmingham.
Yeah, because Birmingham is nowhere near as big as Atlanta. Atlanta is huge.
I also, just to continue on my college football rant, because, you know me, I love college football. In Georgia, there's only one team. You know, you could say the Georgia Bulldogs. I mean, obviously there's more teams, but...
Georgia Tech.
But, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, no, I know.
the Iron Bowl is such a big, pivotal sports moment every year when Alabama plays Auburn. That, I mean, like... Yeah, I'm just saying, there's two big-time teams, and right now, Alabama is split into those two sides. Who's an Auburn Tiger, who's an Alabama Crimson Tide, right? So, I mean... I think, yes, I do think a Birmingham team would work for the NFL, and I think it would do good, but I think it would take at least 5 years to gain a foothold.
Yeah, I would actually agree with Jesse on that one. Like, so when I was talking about Alabama, I would say that's the potential. It could be a really good franchise, you know, but it's going to take time. You know, I mean, like I said, there are college towns, areas with NFL teams, but it took a while to build that culture, you know. Like, I really do feel like the Atlanta Falcons franchise won't be where they're at without a guy like Michael Vick being there. You know, like an iconic player that kind of just takes over. You know what I'm saying? So for Alabama to succeed, it will take time, you know, but once they're rolling, I think it will be really good. You know what I mean? But yeah, there are some, I'll just be honest, there are some concerns right off the bat that are present. And so this isn't something that will happen overnight, like Alabama being automatically popular, say, like, you know, in OKC or San Antonio, but it has that potential, I would say.
Fair enough. What else we got, John?
All right, this is the last one, and this one is an interesting one, and let me explain myself. So Salt Lake City.
No, I'd look to hear it.
Yeah, Salt Lake City, Utah. Let's hear it.
There's a lot more cons than pros, but I think it's just an interesting thought to think. It's just an interesting one to think about.
Okay.
I saw this map once, and it was about like kind of the influence certain cities have around the country. Like, what is their area of influence? And it was just very interesting. Like, the further west you go, certain cities just have this huge geographic influence to them. One of those is Denver, you know, and the other one is Salt Lake City. It has a very large geographic influence. But yeah, they just have a huge geographic influence to them. You know, obviously a lot of that area is fairly sparsely populated, but it's there. You know, they have that influence to them. The Jazz does pretty well there, right?
The Jazz do really well. Here's my only counter to a football team being in Salt Lake City.
I was gonna.
It's on Sundays.
Yeah. That's a good. That is actually a very good point.
I think that's a killer. Because
Well, yeah. So I'm sure you could probably speak more to this, John. But like in the Salt Lake City area, there is a very religious, like it's a religious center.
Yeah.
For I would say the Mormon
Latter-day Saints. Yeah.
Yes. The Mormon religion, and so that having Sunday things could affect that in general.
I think it's hard to say.
their college football teams do well, but their college football teams play on Saturday.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna also mention. Is like the BYU. I mean, right? They do pretty well. So it's like
BYU does well. Utah State specifically.
Yeah, all the college teams do pretty well. I mean, University of Utah is probably number one. Yeah. I mean, they were pushing for a college football playoff spot this last year. If they would have beaten Oregon, they would have been in. So, I mean, definitely, they have a very strong presence of football at the college level.
There's a potential for a culture.
In Salt Lake City.
Yeah, there's a potential for a football culture. But that's one thing I'll be honest, I didn't think about that. You mean the Sunday part.
And it would just be too much to work around because Sunday nights are reserved for a primetime game. and the rest of the NFL isn't going to just give Utah its own specific time slot, whether that's Sunday nights, Monday nights, or Thursdays. They're not just going to give that to Utah.
They're not going to accommodate, yeah.
So there's just a lot working against it.
But I will also mention that Salt Lake City, although it is obviously above average in as far as like religious attendance, as far as like religious groups go, it's not the entire city. Yes, it's a very large part, but there's a lot more to Salt Lake City than just the Mormons. You know what I mean? And I think it would just be a matter of whether or not that remaining population will be enough to pack the stands on Sunday. You know what I mean?
I'll share a personal experience just in regards to Salt Lake City.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Salt Lake City on like a few days trip, and I went to the Salt Lake on a Sunday, and I was the only one there with my two friends.
Okay, yeah.
And if the Salt Lake only has 3 people at it, then I don't know how much of the population outside of, like, the Salt Lake's free.
The Wasatch Range is kind of
to go to versus, actually then also on top of that paying to go to a sporting event on a Sunday. And it was during the summer too. So I would have imagined it being more popular, but it just really wasn't.
I mean, it's obviously way further down on the list. It's probably at the bottom of all the ones we've talked about, but I think it's an interesting one to think about. But yeah.
Geographically, it makes sense. I can see what you're talking about.
Filling in that gap,
and,
the huge
gap. And the
gap.
Jazz do well, but the Jazz don't play in the day. So even if they play on Sundays, they play at nighttime.
Yeah. Simon, you got anything for Salt Lake City?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point, talking about, religion and Sundays and whatnot. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how big of of an impact that'll be, mostly because we haven't seen, like, now that y'all mentioned it, like, there really aren't any professional games on Sunday mornings like that, But, I mean, I don't know. I think there's still a lot of potential there. When you're looking at, Utah as a market, I think that also definitely includes places like Idaho as well, maybe even Montana. And looking crossing into Denver Broncos territory, taking away fans from them potentially. And that's its potential, that's its cap, I'd say. So I think there's definitely potential for a good fan base there. But I don't know, that is kind of a little bit of an issue. It's an interesting issue. Like, I'd like to, I don't know, there's no way of finding out and experimenting, but I'd like to look into that a little bit more if I was someone who was starting an NFL franchise, potentially in Salt Lake City. Because other than that, I think it'd be a great spot. That's just my opinion, though.
Were you going to say something, John?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I'm glad you pointed out exactly what I was trying to mention with that influence. With the Snake River Valley from in southern Idaho. But you're right.
Yep.
It probably would eventually take away a little bit from Denver.
I was just going to say, if there's a team in Salt Lake City, we're talking way far ahead in the future where the NFL doesn't just play games on Sundays, potentially.
Because
but
there's so
that
many
could
teams.
that could be 100 years from now, honestly, because it took a long time to go from 14 games to 16, and it took a long time to go from 16 to 17. So there's just really no need to be playing games on multiple days like that. If that does it for...
No, I gotta throw my sense in here for Salt Lake City. I think, personally, all of my beliefs come from first of all, this. Yes, we talked about how Salt Lake City does have a good football support for their college teams. Again, we talked about it a little bit with Birmingham. I don't think that the people there would enjoy a NFL team there. I really don't think the following would be very big. And if we're talking about straight, like, culture-wise, I would see a team like an Omaha team outperforming a Salt Lake City team, because football is basically the only thing they have in Nebraska. Whereas in a Salt Lake City place, yes, you have the Jazz, but it's known for Park City, which is the ski resort. Everybody I've always talked to about Salt Lake City, all they say is, "Oh, we're going to ski there." So I don't know. I mean, obviously Denver has that, yes, but I don't know. I just don't know if the following would be good enough. Like I said, I think an Omaha team would do better than a Salt Lake City team. So.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns there, honestly. Like, I mean, this is just me being positive, saying that I would hope that a Salt Lake City could survive, like, theoretically, I think it should, but I don't know. I mean, you're right, though. I kind of agree that a Nebraska team would probably thrive a little bit better than a Salt Lake City team, honestly.
Yeah.
And obviously, to wrap things up, there are a lot of cities out there that could also do teams. Like, we're not going to talk about them, but because they're way lower on the list. But like Jesse mentioned, Omaha, Sacramento, there's plenty of options. You mean Louisville? But
Yeah, Sacramento I struggle with a lot because it's already way too many people there, but or way too many teams. But
Kings, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Another interesting one, like you just said, just like Boise, Idaho, that could be an interesting idea too.
I think Boise might be a little too small
to
accommodate, but then again, I also threw out Omaha, so I mean.
Yeah. Yep. So, anyways, that is it for anybody else. Got anything for the U.S. teams? We'll move outside the U.S. I mean,
outside with Honolulu, but
we did throw Honolulu in there. It's still in U.S. territory.
But, I mean, we'll transition into. John, go ahead and give us a rundown on Honolulu, I guess, and then we'll talk about
this will be a good
true international following Honolulu.
So, Honolulu, it's a big city, often forgot about because it's very far away, and that brings up why it might be a little bit difficult to start a team there. There's a lot of logistics when it comes to football. You know, obviously, you got to move all the equipment before all the games, and I don't think I haven't been to Hawaii since I was like 3, but I remember that being a very long plane ride. It's just a lot of time. It's like at that point you might as well put one in London, essentially. But it's a lot of time to get out there, and I think it could give Hawaii a bigger home field advantage than even Denver does because of that. But most of the reason why I think it wouldn't work is simply because of that distance.
What do you know what the demographics look like there at all? Like,
it's a big place. I can pull it up right quick.
I just don't know what the income looks like, and if there's enough people with a high level of income.
It's very wealthy. Hawaii is very wealthy.
It is very expensive to live there. I mean, as you guys know, I am possibly, I've applied for the coaching job at the University of Hawaii, so I've been doing some of that research on it. It's very expensive to live there. So I mean, I don't know how that would translate and stuff like that, but. The only thing while John is looking that up, the one thing I can just think of is, well, first of all, no one goes to the University of Hawaii games anyways. Like, they have maybe a quarter of their stadium filled every game. So
it's about 1 million in Hawaii. 1 million. Metro area, Honolulu.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I would really struggle seeing the Hawaiian culture try to have an NFL team. So.
Well, I mean, there's a lot more people living in Hawaii than just Hawaiians.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, but like once you move there, you kind of just adopt that culture.
Fair enough. They might not have the culture, is what you're saying. They might not have the football culture. Mm-hmm. That's another good point. I think it's more of like
wait.
Go ahead, Simon.
Could I butt in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I mean, this is just me. From what I've done my research on it too. I do think like Hawaiians and people who live in Hawaii, there's a football culture there. You know, like we've seen a lot of great football players come out of there, like Marcus Mariota, or even more recently Tua Tagovailoa. You know, so football in Hawaii is big. I wouldn't doubt the culture on that, but I would doubt, like Cody was saying, how many people would actually be able to afford a game. You know, an NFL game, nonetheless. Honestly, because I think, you know, in a perfect world, all NFL games would be free, but this definitely isn't a perfect world, and that's not realistic at all. Because if that was the case, I think there would be more than enough people to pack the stadium, and they would have a pretty loyal fan base. I don't think, honestly, like there are enough people that could afford or, you know, take time out of their day to go to, you know, an NFL football game, honestly, in Hawaii. So that's just all I gotta say, honestly. I think the culture's there. I just don't think, like fan base wise or even income wise, like realistically, like that would be an option for an NFL Hawaiian franchise.
The same people who are living luxuriously aren't the people going to the football games, and the same people who would want to go to the football games are the people who can't afford it. There's a divide.
Now we're getting way into politics of Hawaii, but that is true.
That's just the point.
That is the point. Yeah, you're right.
Why it wouldn't work right now But I could definitely see a Hawaii team happening before like a Salt Lake team, honestly.
Oh yeah.
Again, I think once the NFL starts moving internationally in the sense of like specifically London, I think that would really open up. Like I think there'd have to be like a London team first before Honolulu was considered.
I agree.
Yeah.
100%.
So
that brings me to
speaking internationally.
Yeah. Okay. So 3 international teams I'm thinking of. 2 of them are a lot more realistic than. Well, actually, I guess all 3 could potentially happen. But Mexico City, Toronto, and London.
Mexico City and Toronto obviously
Are a lot easier to go
being
about.
on the same landmass.
You make it a little bit easier.
So why don't we start there? John, go ahead and tell us about Mexico City and why you think that that'd be a good spot for an NFL team.
Well, for starters, Mexico City is massive. For those of you who don't know, it is the 3rd largest city in North America behind New York and Los Angeles. It's a big place. And Mexico, as far as I know, there's a football culture in Mexico. There's a sports culture in general, obviously. You know what I mean? Why can't football be there too? You know what I mean? And Mexico City, for those of you who don't know, is a little bit more. There is some money in Mexico City. You know what I mean? There's a pretty big middle class. Mexico in general, for those of you, Mexico in general is developing. You know what I mean? There's a growing middle class, so that means there's a growing market for maybe professional sports in general. But I think football would be a good one to start with, and I think it'd be an interesting way to kind of break into the Mexican market in the future, maybe.
Yeah, so over the past few years, the NFL has tried to play a few games in Mexico City. For some different reasons, every time it doesn't happen. But correct me if I'm wrong, Simon or Cody. They have played a game there, correct?
Yes.
So yeah,
games have been played in Mexico City,
and the turnout was great. The
Yes.
stadium was full.
Yep.
Everyone loved it. So I definitely think, out of these 2 we just mentioned, of Mexico City and Toronto, I think Mexico City is the obvious choice for me. So I think Mexico City, yes, I think it could be a very beneficial place to have it if you're going international.
I think the best part about Mexico City for the NFL is I think it's a safe bet.
Mm-hmm.
I think because if you're looking to expand internationally, you want to go with the one that you think would be easiest and would garner the most success immediately. And, you know, when considering other international options like London, this one is obviously way easier to do travel-wise.
Logistically, it's much
so
easier.
I think that this would be a great start for the NFL. For international expansion is Mexico City. And I think that's kind of the only move from here, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah, Simon, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, I was just saying, yeah, like, I totally agree. I mean, this is just my personal experience. I grew up, like I said already, I grew up in Dallas. So just, I guess, the area I lived in had a lot of Latinos and Mexicans in general. And, I mean, obviously, you know, I'm not trying to be stereotypical or anything. Soccer, baseball, they're big sports. But football is something that could definitely thrive. Like, I'll be real, I have at least 5 or 6 friends who have, like, uncles or brothers or whoever that have played, you know, professional American football in some of the minor American football leagues down in Mexico, and people actually go to those because it's dope. And I mean, I don't know, there's something about Mexico, and you know, the people there that they just gravitate towards American football. If I'm being honest, maybe it's some of the influence that's rubbing off from, you know, being so close to Texas or Arizona even. But honestly, I think American football culture there, as of right now, even without a team, is stronger than a lot of people think, and it's something that not a lot of people know about. Like John said, like, you know, financially, it'd be great. You know, there's a huge market there, and they can easily thrive. You know, because I mean, you're not just pulling on the numbers from one city. You're pulling, you know, on the numbers from a whole nation. You know, and even then, you know, from people who are in the United States now who originated from Mexico, that's big for them. And I think I could definitely see a lot of fans, you know, switching over to Mexico City NFL team if they are successful in an ideal world. No, but even now, even if they don't do well right now, I think they could still be really good, and it's an easy next step internationally for the NFL.
All right. Does that kind of address the logistics of Mexico City?
There's some, yeah, obviously there's distance, but I think the thing about Mexico City is that the cons do not outweigh the pros. You know what I mean? One interesting thing about Mexico City is that it is at a higher elevation than Denver, so that could be or at least very close as far as I know. It's a very high elevation city, so that'd be an interesting factor because I know a lot of people get a little butthurt about Denver's elevation. So, but that's a very minor non-issue.
I mean,
if anything,
the only issue it brings in is, I mean, there are some players that when they come to Denver because of sickle cell cannot play because they will die. So like that's the same thing you got to bring it. I mean, I don't think it's that big of a deal, but that's just what the if you're talking about elevation. That's what the NFL would have to look at. But I don't think that's.
Yeah. I don't think it would stop the NFL from putting it in
not
there.
at all.
But yeah, I think it really would be the equivalent of the NFL pretty much opening a floodgate. You mean because once you get Mexico City, then you have access to maybe even Guadalajara, Monterrey. You know what I mean? And then there's also the at-home market. You know what I mean? Like whenever that team travels around, think about it. Like all the ethnic original Mexicans who are now in the United States are probably going to come out to support that team. Maybe even you know what I mean? So it could strengthen the domestic market as well. If you think maybe you know what I mean? I don't want to make any assumptions, but
no, it's definitely a valid point.
Yeah, I think it could not only strengthen. I think the interesting thing about Mexico City is it would not only be strengthening that market. It would not only be breaking into that market and tapping into that. It'd be somehow even tapping into domestic markets where there are teams already. Maybe you mean?
Yeah.
So
I mean, I could definitely see a situation where, let's say, this Mexico City team is playing in LA, the Chargers. There could be more people rooting for the Mexico City team than the Chargers. So.
Yeah, I could see that happening.
That kind of
Yeah.
Jesse, that what you just said kind of leads me to my next point. What's the name of this Mexico City team?
Okay. Well, the first thing that comes to my mind, I've been thinking about it a little bit, is the Aztecs, because I know that I don't think it was the Aztecs that were there, but when you think of Mexico, Central America, you think of those early Native American tribes, and I'm thinking about the other ones like Incas and Mayans. None of those are really going to get much.
Incas weren't in Mexico.
They're in South America.
Yeah, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
out of those three, I think the Aztecs would get the best following because of it sounds like a hardcore name, you know?
Well, Mexico City itself was built on top of Tenochtitlan,
Yeah, so I mean,
the
like,
Aztec
just
capital.
to have that culture,
Historically.
that culture brought into the team, I think the Mexico City Aztecs could be a very...
Because it has been done before. Some teams more respectfully than others. The Chiefs and the Chiefs, yes. Redskins, no. But
Yeah, well, I mean, like, there's still team there is an Aztec team. Like, there is the San Diego State Aztecs. So I mean, like, that's a team that's been in America before. So that's the person that comes to my mind.
Right.
If you guys have anything else,
I mean, I thought of the Eagles. I know there already is an eagle, but
go ahead, Simon. What do you think?
Yeah. I actually love the Aztecs name. I think that's dope. But, I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not as big a fan of this because this is definitely way more of a controversial name. But I think the Conquistadors is another potential name, you know. I think the Conquistadors would be, a name that a lot of people would consider for a Mexico City team. Just because, I mean, I don't know. It depends, there's a lot of negative, in my opinion, negative history that's there. But at the same time, it is a part of culture in Mexico right now. And it's a part of their history as well. So I think that's definitely another name that could work, honestly.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Cody, you got a name?
No.
No. Okay. John, you said the Eagles. There is already the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, so that's why I was like.
Work.
But the reason why it came to mind first is because that's where the seal on their flag is.
Yeah,
you know.
I was thinking of that, but
Yeah.
there was already Eagles.
Yeah, no, that's what I was thinking too. I was like, well, they already
Yeah.
had the Eagles, but I think it'd be cool if they were the Eagles. You know what I mean?
Golden Eagles.
Sorry, Philly fans aren't going to let that one go.
I don't
No.
care about the Philly
That's
fans.
insane. So
Yeah.
that I don't have anything else to say on Mexico City, really.
No, that does bring us to the other one John mentioned just a second ago, the Toronto team.
I just think they already have. I think it's interesting how Toronto specifically has the other three major Big Four sports. You know what I mean? They have a baseball team, they have a basketball team, they have a hockey team. Obviously, hockey's a little bit different, but I think why not a football team? You know what I mean?
The only thing I can say is they already do have a football team, a professional football team.
Well, yeah, the Canadian League,
Football League is there.
Yeah.
And I don't know how well an NFL team going into there would
compete with that one.
Yeah, because I mean, people in Canada love the Canadian Football League, and even people in America love the Canadian Football League. So I mean, like, I just don't know if moving a NFL team into Canada would be a very good idea.
And that just opens up another can of worms because of that. Worms at that point, you could just say, well, why not just combine the leagues? But I don't know.
Oh, I was about to say that. Yeah.
Because then you could that would integrate a lot of teams at once, though.
Yeah, go ahead, Simon.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I was gonna agree with John. Yeah, like just. I mean, okay. So I know a little bit more about combining the NFL and CFL, like that potential deal, because like a really long time ago, like I wrote a sports article talking about the Canadian Football League and a potential merger between them and the NFL. Obviously, the NFL would be the team the organization absorbing the CFL, but I think honestly, I could probably see that happening more than one Canadian football team being there, just because of how popular the CFL is nowadays. And I mean, I don't know. This would have to be something that would happen a really long time from now. But I think that low-key might be a better move than trying to tap into, a Toronto market that, already has a CFL team, I'm pretty sure. And then there are already other CFL teams that people in Canada have been committed to for, like, years. Like, the CFL has been around since, the 60s or 70s? Something like that, almost as long as the NFL. Well, not as long, but, second longest, and I think that's kind of something, hard to erase altogether, because I do think if a CFL team, if an NFL team was to take place in Canada, it would take a lot from the CFL, because seasons do overlap slightly, and that could potentially put the CFL out of business, honestly. So, yeah, I mean, that's just something that I think would be really interesting, and I would probably see happening more than a Canadian team being put there. Because if there was a Canadian team put there, I could see it kind of turning out a little bit more like an LA Chargers situation where, there are some people that go, but home field is kind of weird and it's not exactly like there, I guess. It'd still probably do better than the LA Chargers, but I could see a situation like that unfolding in Canada, honestly.
I think one thing I just learned by looking at this on Wikipedia is that Canada, like CFL, already tried to expand into the United States.
Yes.
Yes, that's true.
I think
that didn't work at all.
No, I'm gonna agree with Simon that a merger between the CFL and the NFL is probably the way that an NFL team gets into Canada.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it would almost be interesting, maybe even making its own third league, in the sense of, like, you have the NFL and AFL league, the CFL league. Within the NFL.
And third division.
Yeah,
okay.
That's what I meant to say. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, sorry, my bad. My bad.
So yeah, you could have a team like you have the NFC, the AFC, and then the CFL. Yeah. Like you'd have to change it around a little bit, but like
CFC.
Yeah, make that a new division in the NFL. If you were gonna do that, yes, you'd have to add probably a few more teams.
Yeah.
But that would also be that would become with the merger of the CFL and the NFL.
And if I'm gonna be completely honest, I don't see a merger happening just because they're not two completely different games, but they are really different games.
Well, I'm pretty sure the Canadians use metric too, so that's probably a big.
Well, also the
CFL team.
The field goal posts are in the front of the end zone in the CFL.
And they get a running start on every play. The offense does. So like, it's a really different game.
It will hit a little different.
It will.
And wait, go ahead, Simon.
No, I just said it would. Like, yeah, I mean the rules are different. Obviously, it's still. Like, if you break it down to the core, like, basic necessity of it, it's still American football. It's just, it's a little bit different. Like, the rules are definitely, like, I mean, I don't know. I did my research, and I didn't really realize this until recently, but I realized the CFL rules are basically just older NFL rules, because a lot of the ideas that they implemented the CFL or that they run in the CFL currently are stuff that the NFL used to do. The only difference is that the CFL didn't evolve quite like the NFL did. So yeah.
I see. But I think we can all agree that Mexico City would be a much better place for an NFL team than Toronto.
Yeah, I think you're right, though.
Yeah.
Toronto in itself, maybe not putting a team there, but that opens up it does open up a door, maybe even just integrating the CFL into the NFL.
Yeah, but that could be a whole nother show. So we'll move on from that.
That and the Canadians, obviously, it might be a little bit insensitive to just assume that, like, oh yeah, we'll just absorb you.
Yeah, so
yeah,
John,
that's fair.
so John, that brings us to our last one. I mean, we've mentioned it multiple times. As of right now, looking at the NFL, this is where they would go international, but it's London.
Yep.
So give us your thoughts on London.
Well, it's far away. It's a very far away place. It's 8 hours difference, time zones. You mean? That makes a lot of logistical problems occur. You have the time it would take for teams to go there, come back. From what I've heard, based on breaking down the logistics of it, it essentially takes away a game each year for each season for each team that goes there. You mean, because of the amount of time it takes them to get there, how they have to accommodate. You know what I mean? Because you're in a completely you're essentially 8 hours difference. You mean, as opposed to the usual, no more than 3 hours difference from what you're usually running when you're traveling around the United States. So that screws things up. Most of the problems occur because of the logistics of it. It does not mean that London could not support a team, because it absolutely can. London in itself is a perfect market, with the exception of the fact that it's just a couple thousand miles too far away.
Well, I mean, again, like I said with New York or Mexico City, there are games every year played in in London. So I mean, like it happens every year now. It's a yearly thing. Usually it's the Jaguars, but I think all three of
the
us.
stadium is pretty filled.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Maybe it could even be like 2 teams, 3 teams, just like New York and LA, but that's just too far away. You mean?
Yeah, I'm sure me, Simon, and Cody all have thoughts on this. So we can all go around. We can start with Cody. You can go ahead and tell us what you think.
I mean, I think expansion doesn't make as much sense as relocation does. I think that honestly, for the NFL and for London, the perfect match is for the Jaguars to move to London. Nobody cares about the Jaguars here. I mean, if you look at their games, even when they're good, they barely have anybody in the stands. Like, I don't even know they were like an AFC Championship contending team, and I don't think the stadium was halfway full on opening day, which is like easily the best selling day for most NFL teams. And I mean, the owner has talked about moving to London. The owner is interested in moving to London. And I think that's kind of what the Jaguars need, is a fresh start in a new market. And I think that makes more sense to clear up the market a little bit more in Florida, just because then there's only 2 teams in there, and also just give Jacksonville a new identity. That's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, to go off what Cody's saying, I don't think a lot of people remember. I mean, I remember because I was sitting there watching it, just praying it would happen. But just, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, they were in the AFC Championship. The Jacksonville Jaguars were 1 game away from going to the Super Bowl, with Blake Bortles as their quarterback. I mean, they gave the AFC champion Patriots a run for their money. Like, they were winning most of the game, and it was such a fun game to watch for me, because I was like, wow, the Jacksonville Jaguars might beat the New England Patriots to go to the Super Bowl. But even with that happening, in that they were 1 game away from the Super Bowl, they still, like Cody said, there's still no people there to watch them play, even though they were 1 game away from the Super Bowl. So I think that, yeah. Simon, what do you have to say about London?
I agree. I think the Jaguars moving to London would be a perfect fit. I think most NFL fans by now know this, that it would be a perfect fit, honestly. Like, their owner has been, upping the number of games they play over there. He bought Wembley Stadium, so technically if they were to move, they would have a home right away. Like, they wouldn't have to wait for a whole new stadium to be built. And, they've kind of been prepping it for years. And so, I think that'd be a great fit. But, this is I mean, honestly, London is a great, market, I should say, but it is a gateway to Europe for the NFL to expand, honestly, and I think it's an important, foothold for sure. But even if, honestly, the market of London in general, and England and the UK and all that, obviously, if there was to be an NFL team, most likely there would be only one NFL team in Europe, and it would be that team. So they would be pulling from a whole fan base in Europe. And I think that's really interesting in itself because if I'm being honest, I do think there are potentially some other European cities that could, honestly, might have a better fan base than London. Just off the bat, the first thing that comes to mind is Germany. If anybody remembers NFL Europe, they had at least 4 or 5 teams. And those 4 or 5 teams were at the top of that league, for a straight 5 or 6 years in attendance. And obviously because they were really good. But at the same time, I mean, people in Germany love American football. It's really interesting. I don't know how that happened out of all of the nations, in the world. But Germany, in my opinion, is about, almost, not completely, but really close to having the same kind of American football culture as a Mexico City or as a Mexico, honestly. And that's just something worth noting, I think, honestly, a franchise in Germany will probably do way better than London. But then we talk about, things like travel. That's a really big issue. And for me, I don't know, that might be a little bit too much, having to travel all that way between the States and London unless, they figure out how to stagger, the schedules kind of. But, it'd be a lot of work. I do think it's possible and it could thrive, but it would definitely be a lot of work that they would have to put a lot of research into, honestly.
I like that idea, and something that you talked about Germany, and I've learned a lot about Germany just from a couple of classes that I've taken, and they just have a sports culture in general. They're a very active nation, and
yes.
They're very fanatic when it comes to sports, and we've seen that they're successful in sports too. You look at their World Cup history, and they've won quite a few World Cups in soccer, and if you look at their Olympic history, they're also successful in the Olympics. And I want to say that if the NFL expands into Europe, we could see a thing where there's 2 different conferences in Europe. So you have the AFC and the NFC play each other. Then you have I don't know, whatever they call it in Europe. You'd have 2 separate conferences and they play each other. And then the champion is the world champion, so to speak.
I like that, but that's way harder to build.
That's way far away.
That's decades away. But
London is the first step, and I think a team moving to London is actually how that happens.
Yeah, because,
I think we're all in agreement that relocation beats out expansion.
They need to plant that seed, and that seed might be less effective if it's not already something that's been built. It'd have to be a sapling more than a seed, and I think the Jaguars are more of a sapling.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that London is a good spot for relocation. I agree with all you guys, but I will play devil's advocate just for our our podcast sake. John did talk about how it's an 8-hour travel distance, and I know me and Cody have talked about this, that NFL players do express that they don't like that because it just throws their whole routine off. Because each NFL player has their own routine, and having to travel 8 hours into a different time zone really just messes with them. I also do think that starting off at the beginning, if there is a team in London, it's going to definitely deter some of the American people from watching the game, because I don't know a lot of people that want to wake up at 6:30 in the morning to watch an NFL football game between the Jacksonville Jaguars and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. No one really wake up to see that, because who cares? Neither of them are contenders, and I think, yes, I would agree with Simon. In order for this to work, they would have to stagger the schedule so that it works. But it's just it's hard to play a professional football game in London at 1 a.m. in the morning if you want it to be prime time in the States. So it's just tough to. I think basically what I'm saying is I think a team in London would lose a lot of American support and viewership if they decide to play there.
That's why I think the Jaguars are perfect, is because they barely have any American fans or viewers in the first place.
So there's nobody to piss off.
Yeah, and honestly, the Jaguars are a team where if it doesn't work in London, they'll just come right back and maybe go to one of those other cities that we talked about earlier in the podcast.
Is it alright if I plug something real quick? There's a recommended video. There's a video, I think Simon knows about this because I showed him it. It explains, it literally does break down exactly what we're talking about, the logistics of the NFL. Talking about those travel costs, the time, why that time is important. It's a video by a channel called Wendover Productions, and it's literally called the NFL's Logistics Problem. I would highly recommend it if you're interested in this.
We will.
It does talk about.
We will put the link to that YouTube video in the social media, so look out for that.
Yeah. If you guys are okay with that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then I know the YouTuber will be free cloud.
Yeah. I can't recommend that guy enough, but that's besides the point. Yeah. Just focusing on the matter at hand.
That's just the cons that I can see from London.
They definitely exist though.
Yeah, I think that wraps up the international NFL landscape.
I think an important city to also remember, one that I just realized is, Greeley, Colorado. I think is.
Anyways,
so,
yes.
Does anyone have any other thoughts on NFL expansion?
Just to add on to that, just as final remarks on London, I think honestly, if you were to have a team in London, it really would help to market, obviously to Europe in general, just to build up that support. Because Jesse, you're right, Americans aren't going to tune in to watch a 1 a.m. game or whatever, a 7 a.m. game, American time. That is being played in London because that doesn't make any sense. So I think for London to work, they would have to tap into maybe the French markets or the German markets or all the other markets that are over there because I think that's really the only way that this would work, honestly. Because already players are going to hate to travel there, But obviously the NFL is a business. If you get fans to pack the stadium, then the owners won't care. And it'll work out either way, and they'll continue to have games there whether players like it or not. And that might just have to be something they'll have to adjust to as long as the money is there.
And I think another thing that makes the London move easier is just the day and age that we live in. Because they could put the game on TV whenever they want, really. I mean, it wouldn't be live, but nothing we watch is truly live. Really?
Bro, you're getting too philosophical here, man.
So, well, I just mean, there's a delay in normal TV, so they could easily just play it at a normal time, and American audiences would be none the wiser.
Yeah.
So,
they wouldn't care.
Yeah.
But I think that kind of does it for my opinions on NFL expansion.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was the NFL, and when we come back, we will continue to talk with our special guest, John, about NBA.
Coming up next.
Alright, what's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Cycle 365. This is episode 28. And we're going to continue our expansion talk by talking about NBA teams. So, John, what do you got?
All right. Again, this is going to follow a similar structure, but it's going to be a little bit more, concise. So top 4 teams, I would say, for NBA, and these are fairly subjective. No particular order, with the exception of one. I'd say Seattle is probably number 1, in my opinion, out of all the teams.
Yeah.
And then the other ones, could go either way, but San Diego, Las Vegas, and St. Louis. Anyway, to start, Seattle. Yes, there's the Trailblazers, pretty far south. I guess you could almost say it's the reverse, maybe even of the of the Seahawks, where it's maybe it's too oversaturated, because of that distance between them, how close they are. But Seattle does have a very strong sports culture, and they're close to getting all 4 potentially, because the hockey team is coming, and they support the hell out of the Seahawks and the Mariners, So why not?
Well, and they're still mad about the Supersonics leaving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the team did survive there, so it's
the first thing I'm going to say is to counter what you said of just it's basically the reverse. It's not. I don't think it's.
I'm saying potentially it could be the reverse.
I don't think it's the reverse because again we talked about how strong that brand was, the Seahawks. I just don't think the Trailblazers brand is the Seahawks brand. So I definitely think that if a team went to Seattle, that's a basketball team, I think it could be just fine, and it wouldn't compete with Portland's fan base.
All right. But yeah.
Yep, I agree. Probably, I don't know, probably because we've seen a Seattle team and a Portland team exist at the same time, too. And it worked out fairly well in that era. So, I think Seattle deserves the team. I feel like, obviously OKC is doing well in OKC, but I think, they didn't really deserve to have their team moved, and it was just really unfortunate. Because the fans there, they want their Supersonics back every year.
Yeah, I agree that, and it was definitely on the city that the Supersonics left. And the city has a history. They tried to push the Mariners out as well back in when Ken Griffey used to play baseball. And, I think that the city, well, it doesn't have the same people in power as the ones that ran the Supersonics out of town. And I think that there's one stipulation to a basketball team returning to Seattle, and I think that it has to be called the Supersonics.
Absolutely.
I mean that could happen. It could be just like the Browns. You mean?
Yeah, it could be easily done.
Yeah.
I think if you try and give the people of Seattle something else, they're still going to root for it, but they would be ecstatic, and I think that they would borderline sell out, if not definitely sell out their first game. And I think that with the hockey team coming to Seattle, there's a shared arena aspect too that a lot of NBA and NHL teams do already.
That's what I was just going to bring up. Yeah, if you didn't bring it up first, I was going to say that I know when Supersonics were leaving Seattle, it had to do partially with the arena situation. But now that they're building a brand new arena for the hockey team, why not just make it also a basketball stadium? Because that's what we see it here in Denver at the Pepsi Center. Like, it works out fine. Just do the same thing, and then you don't have to worry about the arena situation anymore.
And actually, that can be said for a lot of teams. You mean, some of them I'm going to bring up later. You mean, but that could also. Well, we'll get back to that. But I just think Seattle's a good spot. You mean, I think there's very few cons to it. You mean?
I think it would be easy. I think it'd be a seamless expansion.
Yep.
Oh yeah, easily. Even if they suck for a couple years, like Seattle fans are just going to be happy that they have their team back.
Yeah.
Because they've already lost it once.
They'll be grateful. They know what it's like to lose.
They'll be grateful for what they have, and they won't complain.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's why the Cleveland Browns fans are so loyal, even though they're dysfunctional. So there you go.
They could be more decent this year, I think, but we'll see.
But I think so all thumbs up on Seattle.
I think it's actually funny you mentioned the Browns. It's literally a very similar story to the Browns. You mean?
It is.
They lose their team and they get one back, and they just call it the Browns again, and they're still just happy to have the Browns. You mean?
So
Yeah, whether they're good or not.
Yep, they're happy to have the Browns.
But I do want to talk about some of these other places that you talked about.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Where would you say, just geographically, you would put, out of the three that you listed, Las Vegas, St. Louis, and San Diego, which team would you go with first?
Las Vegas, probably. I think there's a couple of reasons why. I think basketball simply just does better on the coasts, from what I notice. You mean? It's just there's a geographic element to what sports do well in certain places, and we'll get to that more when we talk about the NHL. It's a lot more apparent in the NHL, but it's also somewhat apparent in the NBA. For instance, I just don't think basketball does as well in the South. You know what I mean? It's just not their sport. You know what I mean? But basketball does very well on the coast, specifically California. You know what I mean? Like, with the exception of maybe the Clippers. Like, people come out for the California teams. Yeah.
I'd say the only exception is probably the Kings.
Yeah, because the Clippers are fine.
Yeah.
That's mainly because the Kings are just really bad.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's one of the things where it's like I know I talked about this before. I think LA is not a football city, but they're definitely a basketball city. You know, they support the Lakers, and I don't think their Lakers are fair weather fans either. You know? Well, I know.
I mean, it has helped. The Lakers have been
really good forever,
so.
but
I mean, they're annoying, but they're not fair weather.
You know what I mean? And I think from what I know too, Golden State Warriors fans are pretty strong, right? not so
Cody doesn't want
much.
to talk
I
about the
guess.
Golden State Warriors.
I don't either. I don't like them either.
But talking about
I mean,
Las
I'll
Vegas.
talk
Yeah,
about
Las
it.
Vegas.
Yeah, no.
I think it's fair to kind of clump in Las Vegas in a sense. Culturally, it's very similar to California, Southern California culturally. That's a geography aspect, but so similar to the reason why Las Vegas in general is just there's up until very recently there have been no sports in Las Vegas. I mean, I think they would take anything they could get, and they have taken a lot. I mean, Raiders are moving there. They got the Golden Knights. You mean, why not basketball? I think basketball could do really well in Las Vegas. You know what I mean? They got the cultural aspect there. You mean I think basketball would work really well there. That and they just simply have I think they just have a sports market.
Oh, no, yeah. I mean, I was just going to say that I agree, honestly. John has a really good point. Basketball is actually really big in Nevada. I don't know what it is. Like, I know a good number of people who live in Nevada nowadays, and they kind of just grew up loving basketball, but obviously since there's not a team in Nevada, they either opted for the Lakers or, you know, the Warriors or the Clippers sometimes. Mostly Lakers and Warriors, though. And I think basketball is a sport that, you know, it might be a little bit more popular than football or hockey in Las Vegas. I think basketball could really thrive over there, and it'd be a really good fit, honestly.
Going off that point, that's one thing I was going to bring up too. Is like, I do think basketball would even do better than the football team will do, the Raiders will do, because again, it's such a big tourist attraction that people are just going to come to the Las Vegas Strip and just want to hang out and spend their money there for a week and then leave. And going to a football game is a big commitment, whereas going to a basketball game on a night, that's something that I guarantee a tourist would want to do. Like, hey, let's go to the casino. Let's go to the basketball game, watch a pro basketball game, and then go back to the casino. Like, I think that is just something that
It's an accessible activity.
Yeah, I think it's a very accessible activity, and I think it would be it would draw more people to go to that sporting event than a football game. Because, like I said, a football game is a big, especially on a Sunday afternoon, it's a big commitment to go to. It's an all day thing, whereas you can have a full day, go to a basketball game, and then go home afterward and still do stuff. So I definitely think that would be definitely a thing that would bring people in.
I'm going to use a former point to advocate for this Las Vegas basketball team. There's an arena there for them.
I was going to bring that
they
up
just
too,
pair
yeah.
up with the Golden Knights. I mean, the arena's already there, and the arena's nice.
Yeah.
Like, and
It is.
And our good friend Dave actually recently went to a Golden Knights game, and he talked about that the atmosphere there was amazing, that the fanfare there is definitely present, and we see a huge fanfare for the Nevada men's basketball team come March Madness time or even tournament time. So the possibility is definitely there, and I think that'd be a fun addition to the NBA. And I would even argue that a team could even move. Like the Sacramento Kings could honestly move to Vegas, and I think it would suit them way better.
The Vegas Kings. That sounds nice.
It even works. Like, that
Vegas
would
Kings.
be a thing that needs to happen.
Yeah.
I think they're the best
Yep.
suited team to relocate there.
I think we could argue this later. I think Las Vegas is one of those cities that maybe could do each of the big four.
Yeah.
I mean, like Denver. I think Seattle's another one. Good example of one that can handle all the big four. You know what I mean? Some cities just can't, even if they're huge. You know what I mean? But I think Las Vegas can, and that includes basketball. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I agree. I most certainly agree with basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
I might even put Las Vegas. Well, obviously Seattle, we would want the Supersonics there. But if a team's going to relocate, I would say it's better to even go to Las Vegas than Seattle.
Mm-hmm. I think they're interchangeable for me. They could both.
I think that
number
the
one.
Supersonics could be an expanded team, and I think that
Yes.
specifically the Kings should move to Vegas.
Yeah.
The Las Vegas Kings,
Sounds good.
it's pretty sick.
Because you can also change their colors up from the purple and black to gold and black.
Yeah, you could do something way more fancy. Plus, there's already a Kings team in California,
Yeah.
being the LA Kings, that has dark colors,
Yeah.
so that creates a bit of an identity problem for sure.
And specifically talking about the Sacramento Kings, it's like there's already that geographic element to it where there were a lot of the fans that supported the Kings. It'll be a lot, even the ones that do like the Kings in Sacramento, it'll be a much easier transition as opposed to moving them across the country. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And moving them to Las Vegas. You know what I mean?
And the NBA doesn't have revenue sharing as hardcore as some of the other sports leagues. So Sacramento is a team that in recent years has found itself close to, if not in the negatives.
Because they're having to compete with Golden State.
And just all of them there.
And the other LA teams.
Yeah.
And that's why
Yeah.
I'd say the one team that I would probably disagree with most on your list might be San Diego, unless it was like the Kings moving to San Diego, honestly.
I mean, we can go into San Diego now.
Yeah, we'll go to San Diego next.
San Diego, you're right, is an interesting one. You mean? I think most of the pros for it, one we already talked about, there's a stadium there. One of the main reasons why I think San Diego would work is similar to why. It's similar with something I touched on before. I think Southern California basketball just does really well in Southern California. You know what I mean? So I think San Diego, there could be a market for that. You know what I mean? I just think, I think of all the sports that you can move to San Diego, I think it would either have to be basketball or football. But I think I'd probably advocate more for football, honestly. I mean, no, basketball. Basketball, honestly.
I would say I would advocate football more than basketball in San Diego. I just don't know if people in San Diego care about basketball that much.
I mean, they've never had a team.
They never have, and
Well, yeah, they have.
They have?
Yeah, so the Clippers used to be in San Diego before they moved to LA.
How long ago was that?
A really long time ago. Like,
Do you know how they did?
I don't know. What do you mean?
Like, just
It might have been so long ago.
like
it doesn't matter.
like fanfare. Do you have any idea about that history or no?
I mean, that's pretty far back, honestly. Like, there's a reason they moved to LA, probably the same reason why, you know, the Chargers moved to LA. I'm pretty sure it's pretty similar, but yeah, I'm pretty sure LA Clippers, they're in San Diego from 1978 to 1984.
That's pretty recent,
Yeah.
relatively.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know. I just go back to my point of I don't know how much fan support a San Diego NBA team would get. I mean, you can see it. They have it is a Division I AA school, but they have the San Diego University for the basketball team, and they just don't. I don't think they get a very big showing, and that is the flagship university there in San Diego. So I mean, I don't know.
I think an interesting thing to bring up with San Diego is, and this is something I'm just thinking of. I don't know how big. I'm sorry. Okay. I think an interesting thing to bring up with San Diego, one that I didn't think about immediately, but I think is important. You have one of the largest military installations in the country there. A lot of people who are not native Californians from around the country that maybe could support that a little bit. You know what I mean? Basketball in San Diego. You know what I mean?
And going to a basketball game is easier than a football game, as Jesse discussed.
It's something that a guy can he can go on leave for a night, you know what I mean, and he can go see a basketball game. It's a much like Jesse was saying, it's a much more accessible activity, you know what I mean? Especially for guys who are busy and young and might not have the money, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and additionally, a basketball team doesn't have to do as well as a football team.
Mm-hmm. And much lower price margins. You know, or how would you say?
I mean, it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And there's less seats too. So.
Yeah.
And you can have more basketball games. You can try them out. Like there were way more basketball games this season than football games.
There's 100%. There's over 4 times as many.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Was
Yeah,
it
I think San Diego would do probably okay. And just to add on to that, they did have another franchise before the Clippers. They had the San Diego Rockets, who relocated in 1971 to Houston, obviously. So they've had teams there, and I don't know, like, it was kind of early on. Like, 1971 is still pretty early on NBA-wise. But I think they would do okay. I don't think they do as good as Seattle or Las Vegas and have, like, a rabid fan base. But, you know, they could be, like, a middle-of-the-pack, you know, kind of team like, I don't know. They might be the same as Charlotte or maybe even a little bit better than Charlotte, you know. So I don't know. San Diego could work out. It's not my priority, though.
I don't think they'd be dragging like some of the teams in the NBA do right now. But
Charlotte.
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely not a priority. And then
St.
Wow.
Louis.
St. Louis.
So the one thing I wanted to preface before, I think one hard thing about the NBA when it comes to expansion is that I'm not sure there really are that many places that they can go that they already haven't. So a lot of these are more or less just maybes. You know what I mean? Like I don't really have strong evidence one way or the other than simply filling in the gaps in them being large populations that don't already have a team nearby. And St. Louis is one of those. One thing that does make St. Louis easier is that it does already have a venue for hockey. They have a hockey team, the Blues, right?
Yep.
The Blues.
Won the Stanley Cup last year.
Yeah.
Good for them.
And so there's already that infrastructure aspect to it. You know what I mean? They already have the infrastructure there. St. Louis, they come out for sports. We already talked about it with football. You know what I mean? Why not try basketball? I don't think has there ever been a team in St. Louis for basketball?
I
Not
don't
that I
think
know
so.
of.
Yeah, I don't think so.
A really long time ago, I'm pretty sure, but I don't know, they've lost a lot of teams, so it kind of doesn't matter, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think that the venue part,
Okay.
I think for the NBA, the venue is what matters most to them. And the NBA makes a lot of decisions with the NHL as far as like the way that they run their leagues and they collaborate a
Well,
lot.
because there already is a lot of overlap with the venues, like you're saying.
Yeah, and like honestly, making venues multi-use is it's beneficial to the owner of the arenas too, because they're making money either way, and by having more events in there, you know, balancing between an 82-game hockey season and an 82-game basketball season, you make way more money as a venue, and you're less likely to end up negative because running a facility is expensive. So you got to try and make as much money as possible with it, and I think that that's why I'd even argue that a St. Louis team makes more sense than a San Diego team, just because building a stadium is so expensive.
And one of the main reasons that we talked about with St. Louis before, one major roadblock was the fact that it was the stadium. You know, what I mean, when it came to football, that does not exist for basketball.
True.
You know what I mean? They already have it there. They already have a venue. All right. Any other
Yeah,
thoughts?
Simon, you got anything else about St. Louis?
Yeah, so they did have an NBA team, I just looked it up. It was, like I said, it was a really long time ago. It was the St. Louis Bombers. They existed for exactly one season from 1949 to 50, and then the St. Louis Hawks from 1955 to 1968. And obviously the Hawks moved to Atlanta, so that happened. Oh, and they did actually win an NBA title in 1958 as the St. Louis Hawks. And then, you know, obviously the ABA had the spirits of St. Louis. So, you know, there's a little bit of a basketball culture there. And, you know, there's, like you said already, there's a stadium, so facilities aren't much to worry about. So I think the people of St. Louis would appreciate a basketball team. Probably wouldn't be, you know, a huge priority, as much of a priority, like y'all said already, as Las Vegas or even Seattle. But a St. Louis basketball team could potentially thrive under the right circumstances.
Jesse, do you have anything to add?
I think you guys summed it up pretty well. I think St. Louis would be fine. I definitely pick St. Louis over San Diego.
All right. So that, I guess.
What's your the list of honorable
Yeah,
mentions?
that's well. Actually, real quick, if you guys want to talk about it, how would you rank those four? You know,
Oh yeah, kind of like what we did
yeah,
with the last.
I think that's a good segue.
Okay.
It's like
I go Seattle 1, Vegas 2, St. Louis 3, and then like a pretty decent drop off to San Diego 4.
okay,
That sums it up good.
yes, I
Just
agree.
because
Yeah.
Seattle would be it would be like they never left. I promise.
Yeah, oh yeah.
All right.
So
Oh, yeah. Agreed.
All right, should we move on to these honorable mentions?
Yep.
Let's hear them.
And again, similar to what I tried to mention before, a lot of these are more filling in the gaps. Some of them, for instance, for some of these, it has to do with venues. You know what I mean? There's venue overlap that could happen, but a lot of these, again, it's just filling in the gaps. So going down the list, you got Kansas City, maybe, but if you're already putting one in St. Louis and you have Denver, maybe not. You know what I mean? Baltimore, but. Again, because I think basketball does very well on the East Coast, right? The Wizards do well. The
Wizards are okay.
yeah,
I mean they do well. So nice though.
the Phillies. Then again, Philadelphia comes out for all their sports.
The
New
Knicks are
York,
bad and they still put butts in
yeah.
seats.
New York loves their basketball. You know what I mean? The Celtics do well. You know, so why not Baltimore? Maybe. You know what I mean? Cincinnati. It's a big city. That's really all I got to say. That's really the only reason why I'm going.
Okay, alright, sure.
Yeah. Nashville, again, just big place. Maybe. You know what I mean? Pittsburgh, though. I think Pittsburgh is interesting. I'd probably rank Pittsburgh a little bit higher because Pittsburgh comes out for their sports.
I'd say Pittsburgh jumps out
Yeah.
to me the most out of all those, especially because they already have the Penguins.
And it would be completing they'd have all four. You know what I mean? Potentially.
Yeah, and if they made them,
That's true.
if they made them black and silver, or black and I don't know, what is it?
Black
Yellow?
and
What is
yellow.
it?
Gold. Yeah.
Yeah, they would all be
Yellow.
the same colors. So
Yeah, and then, but yeah, the other thing I was gonna mention is there's that venue overlap. You know what I mean? They'd be able to share the venue with the Penguins. So yeah, I think Pittsburgh does stand out a lot more than the rest.
let's let our
Pittsburgh
fan-
expert.
go first. What do you think, Simon, about a Pittsburgh NBA team?
It's interesting because, I mean, I'm just going to be honest, like, Pittsburgh's not really a basketball town. Like, obviously, Pittsburgh is ran by the Steelers, right? Then, you know, the Pirates and Penguins are in there because, you know, they've been equally, well, I don't know about equally, but they've been successful in the past. And, I don't know, I think people would eventually just come out to Pittsburgh games. They might not be, like, huge fans of basketball, per se, but I mean, you never know. I mean, I think Pittsburgh fans are just in general like crazy about the Pittsburgh sports teams, and that's what would attract them more. And it wouldn't really be like, oh, cool, like we have a basketball team. It'd just be like, oh, we have another Pittsburgh team that we could all like mob at and and support. So I think actually that would work really well, and I could see some rivalries with the Philly even, you know, because I mean, I don't know, I'll just be honest. I don't know how happy 76ers fans could be all the time, but if there's another team in Pennsylvania that might be having a little bit more success, and you know you have an opportunity to rep your hometown, that might be the move.
Just so you have any thoughts?
The only thing I think, Simon brought up the point, the only thing I can think of is they're just so dedicated to the Steelers that would they be able to, I mean, I don't think it'd be that big of a deal to add another one in there, but that's all I can think of. Yeah, but I'd agree with the fact that I don't think 76ers fans are super happy all the time, so having another team might work.
See, I'm gonna play devil's advocate, even though I was the one that promoted it. The Penguins have gone bankrupt multiple times, and the Pirates are a small market team that
Don't compete.
that
ever.
can't compete because of they don't have money. So the Steelers honestly financially do way better, and the Penguins have always been a successful organization too. Like even before Sid Crosby, they'd won multiple Stanley Cups with a player, and part of this player's contract, Mario Lemieux, was he was given a portion of the team because they just didn't have money. So he was a player owner because that was the only way to keep them afloat and for him to basically pay himself. So there has been financial troubles with Pittsburgh teams before, and I just don't know if the financials of the Pittsburgh area allows for a basketball team to be thrown into the mix on top of the Penguins, who people would show loyalty over because hockey's a way more hard-nosed sport than basketball is, and even over the Pirates or the Steelers for sure.
I think I believe that it's a little bit easier generally for basketball teams, you know what I mean, than hockey. There's usually a bigger market to pull from. I mean, it's a much more accessible sport, in my opinion, for a lot of people. Specifically for reasons that we've already gone over. You mean quicker games? They're more common. There's less time dedication to it. You mean, so I think playing devil's advocate to your devil's advocate. I think if any sport could break into Pittsburgh, it could be basketball.
Fair enough.
Because of that accessibility of it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, honestly, it is a concern though financially. Like, I think if there was to be a Pittsburgh basketball team, they just have to be careful about, you know, when they schedule their basketball games. Like if it's a Sunday or a Sunday night, you best believe mostly everyone in Pittsburgh is going to go to a Steelers game than a basketball game, and that's how it's always going to be until the end.
Till the end.
So
Till the world ends.
So if they just, sorry, am I?
No, go ahead.
Very good.
Okay, so honestly, if they just schedule it right, hey, Sundays and possibly Saturdays, because university fit sometimes are off limits, and during the football season, schedule accordingly. Don't screw yourself over and schedule yourself the same day as the Pittsburgh Steelers game, because I guarantee more people will go to the Steelers game than a basketball game. So.
Yep. True. Yeah, and that brings us to the next one that John had, with an overlapping facility thing would be Nashville. I mean, the Nashville Predators are already in Nashville, so they already have the venue there. But what are your guys' thoughts on a Nashville NBA team?
There's obviously a conflict with the Grizzlies. You mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's mostly what it is. Filling in that gap. Nashville, big market. They really only have the closest team to support is the Grizzlies by far. I don't even think geographically there's a closer team to support, except maybe no, it's the Grizzlies.
I think it'd make more sense. I think it'd make more sense if Memphis just moved to Nashville. If I'm being completely honest,
Perhaps, yeah.
The thing about the Predators is they don't do really well financially, even though they're one of the more successful hockey teams. I mean, you did mention like the access thing, like more people can play basketball, so basketball's an easier sport to get into.
And we'll get into hockey and its limitations, but yeah.
I mean, yeah, the Preds already don't do well. Plus Tennessee. Like, I'm pretty sure the University of Tennessee is in Nashville, right?
No, it's not Nashville. The University of Tennessee is in Knoxville, which is about...
It's way east of it.
It's east, northeast of it.
Yeah.
Northeast of it, okay.
Yeah.
Appalachian. In the Appalachian.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Well,
yeah.
That's closer to Nashville than Memphis.
It's
No.
about the same.
It's about the same.
It's about the
yeah.
same.
Yeah.
They're about the same distance. So
Yeah, Nashville's right in the middle of...
Yeah, Nashville's in the center. Memphis is over here by Arkansas, and Knoxville's near North Carolina on the other side. So it's like one line.
Line of cities.
No, I definitely agree with Cody. I think if there's going to be another team in Tennessee, I think you just got to move the Grizzlies to Nashville. But I personally think that the Grizzlies are good in Nashville or good in Memphis.
That's what I'm.
Yeah, they're
that's what I'm
fine.
thinking
They're
too. It's
fine,
like
too.
they're
Yes.
right. They're fine right where they are. Why move them? You know what I mean?
So,
Agreed.
you have anything else to say about Nashville, Simon?
No, not really. I mean, if there was to be a team in Nashville, it'd probably be the Grizzlies. But I think the Memphis Grizzlies are fine, or not even fine. Like, they're better than fine, honestly, where they're at right now. You know, they already have that history. So I don't know. I don't think another team will be able to survive if they just straight up added another team in Nashville, though. So that's just my opinion.
It's the same reason why we wouldn't put a football team in Memphis.
Yes, no, I think it's the exact same.
It's the exact same reason, just
Switched.
reversed. You know what I mean?
Switched, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
we'll just breeze through this one real quick. Cincinnati.
No.
Just filling in gaps. That's the only reason why I brought it up. You
I
know
would
what
say no.
I mean? Yeah. I agree.
I mean, people barely go to Bengals
Yeah.
games. And they're like the only team in Cincinnati.
There's the Reds.
Yeah, no,
People don't go to Reds games either. But
Yeah, I agree. I'd rather honestly have a team in Baltimore than Cincinnati.
Well, then let's go to Baltimore.
Baltimore is a basketball town.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm saying,
They
like,
produce
yeah.
some of the best basketball players in the nation, and at one point, there was a high school that had 5 NBA players starting, like 5 future
Yeah.
NBA players. So, I think Baltimore is a pretty good spot, honestly. The only thing that I have a concern with is building a facility, because Baltimore,
does not have a hockey team.
well, it doesn't have a hockey team,
It
and
doesn't have room.
I don't think that they would be able to get the funds from the community to build it.
That
Honestly,
is also an important portion, is that there are political reasons. You know, what I mean?
Yeah.
Not political, not as in like left right, as in like simply just
Yeah.
getting the will to build it. You know, because Baltimore
Yeah.
has been in the news for not being a bastion of wealth. I guess you could say
Yep.
there's not much money in Baltimore.
Yeah. And that's just facts.
Yeah.
So.
Also, they have a
Yeah.
superstar in Lamar Jackson that just came in, so I think all of their sport focus wants to go to him, to be honest. So,
But in a perfect world,
Yeah.
Baltimore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Baltimore definitely it has the culture for it. They just don't have the money, I don't think.
I will say that culture comes from, I mean, if we're talking about basketball, Maryland, the University of Maryland Terps, their basketball team is always good. And I think that would just be another reason of why this culture is so good.
And the Wizards do very well. It's probably more likely that people will continue to. It'll probably be easier for people to just commute to Wizards games than it will to just build a stadium in
it's not that
Baltimore.
far away.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a shame because it'd be cool to have a, Baltimore basketball team. I don't know. I think so.
All right.
All right.
Just
Last one.
I guess wrap up Kansas City. I think for me it's like whatever, one or the other.
St. Louis makes way more sense than Kansas City because of the venue already existing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And plus, Kansas City, this kind of goes into this kind of goes back to the college established fan bases. Like, if you're a basketball fan in I guess Kansas City would be in Missouri.
It's close
like,
enough.
Kansas City it's do you know geography of Kansas City? It's right on the border.
It's right on the border.
Yeah, most of the city is in Missouri, like the big part of it, but there's a very large part of it's still in Kansas.
Well, Kansas fans who are basketball fans associate with the Jayhawks.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I feel like, and I think this is even more different than even Alabama or Auburn.
Absolutely.
Because the Jayhawks are the only team in Kansas that's.
Yeah, not only the only team, but just the fact of their dominance throughout NCAA basketball forever. I would say, yes, you can say Alabama has had a dynasty in football for these last, 10 years? But before that, they were terrible. There comes a time we're not good. But Kansas has always been a presence and always been good in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that's all the thoughts I have on these NBA expansions.
Yeah, should we rank these ones too? These honorable mentions?
I think Pittsburgh and Baltimore. I think Baltimore 1, Pittsburgh 2. The rest, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I agree. Yeah.
And you could
Pittsburgh too.
You could even sell Baltimore, honestly, if part of building facilities, promising potential jobs.
Oh yeah.
So you could definitely do something like that where there would be a huge surge in jobs, especially for the construction of the facility, and they could potentially play at the University of Maryland's just arena until it's built too. So they could kind of have it concurrently going. So we've seen something happen like this before, and I believe that it could happen. It's just a matter if it's sustainable. But that would be their problem once it's built.
And I guess another thing to quickly touch on while we're still on it, basketball/hockey venues are much more versatile than football and baseball. You know what I mean? You can do a lot more than just simply basketball and football and basketball and baseball. No, basketball and hockey in them. You know what I mean? And also there's the fact that there are so many basketball and hockey games in general. There's more jobs coming for those event staff positions. You know what I mean? So this is getting outside the realm of sports. This is getting outside the realm of specifically sports, but from economic incentive, I think basketball and hockey teams are a lot better for communities than football for a variety of reasons that we've already touched on. The accessibility of them, you know what I mean? They're generally a little bit cheaper, you know what I mean? Less time commitment, you know what I mean? And they provide more jobs because there's just so many more games.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
we also got concerts that could come in.
Yeah.
And all those things.
So, Baltimore, I think you may even be able to think of a Baltimore team as an investment into the city. You know what I mean?
And then for the league.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd say Baltimore 1.
Mm-hmm. And you can say the same thing about St. Louis, too, for similar reasons. You know what I mean? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, well, that does it for the NBA segment, correct?
Mm-hmm. So, coming up, we have NHL/MLB.
Yes, we do.
Welcome back to the last segment of our special expansion edition episode 28, recorded on April 8th, 2020. We're back here with our special guest, John Walsh. John, we got NHL and a little bit of MLB talk. Go ahead and take the reins. What do we got for the National Hockey League? What does the future of expansion look like?
Well, before you go, I just want to mention to all the viewers and everybody, the Seattle expansion franchise has been put into play. they will be going into they'll start being starting play in 2022. So in the year 2022, they will be starting play. So just keep that in mind as we talk through this. Go ahead.
So, there's a lot of, like we already mentioned, there's a lot of overlap with NBA, mostly in the sense of like the venue. You know what I mean? So whenever a city has a venue for NBA, that generally makes it a lot easier, in my opinion, for the NHL to break into, similar to in the reverse. But the difference is NHL is much more limited in where they can expand for other reasons, mostly cultural. You know what I mean? It just doesn't. The NHL just simply doesn't do very well the further south you get. You know what I mean? And it's just not as accessible as a sport for most people. Most people do not play hockey. You know what I mean? It's a very hard sport to get into.
It's expensive.
It's expensive. So there's two major limiting factors. And geographically, generally, you're mostly limited to the northern areas. You know what I mean? So
the NHL did try and expand southward, and the Atlanta Thrashers are a victim of it just flat out not working because they're just not a team anymore.
And hockey is just one of the few sports that doesn't work in Texas. They have one team, the Stars. You know what I mean?
Dallas Stars.
Yeah,
And the Stars are,
and that's frankly
they
enough
are
for
successful.
Texas. Yeah,
but I just really don't think that
Any
they'd
other
be
team
able
is
to
good,
build
yeah.
another one.
yeah, exactly. So those are two main considerations. In fact, two of the cities on here are in Canada. So because I'm not saying international for this because the United States and Canada are already in a joined league essentially. So
Go for it.
one of these teams
but,
is in
but you're
Canada.
right. I mean, a part of the original 6 was majority Canadian teams. So
So yeah. So obviously, we're gonna be talking about. This also includes Canadian cities as well. You know what I mean? Which we should get that right out of the way. Quebec. You know what I mean? They used to have a team. I know that.
Yeah, the
And-
Quebec Nordics became the Colorado Avalanche. That's
Yeah.
why Cody is hair flipping in headbottom.
dude, you could still buy Nordiques jerseys.
So go ahead.
Open market there. That and it's Canada. Canadians, they like their hockey. You know what I mean?
Yep. I'm definitely sure. I think Quebec would be a great place to put a hockey team.
Yeah.
I mean,
And it completes the last of the major cities in Canada, except maybe Halifax or Hamilton or whatever. But you got Quebec. You know what I mean? Not much else to say other than yeah.
Yeah, I think obviously, you know, being a Colorado Avalanche fan, we were happy that the Nordiques left, but I know like some people in Quebec weren't necessarily happy.
Oh yeah.
So especially because we won with the team that they had. We won 2 cups with the exact same team that they had. So they definitely should have won some Stanley Cups. And I definitely think that the fan base is there. And you talked about it, definitely culturally, Canada is more receptive to hockey teams, and Quebec is the last one of the major cities, being, you know, Toronto has one, Winnipeg has one, Vancouver
Ottawa,
has one,
Montreal
Ottawa has one,
yeah.
you know.
Edmonton, Calgary, yeah.
So there's already a bunch of teams in Canada that, especially in like the major cities, but Quebec is bigger than, I'd say, you know, a handful of the ones that we just listed off.
Yeah, you got like London, Windsor, but that's Detroit. So
So honestly, I think that's a great fit for a Quebec team.
yeah, I do too. Just simply put, I think it would be well received there, and it would just fit right in.
Seamless.
all right.
What else we got?
Portland. Similar reasons. I know this has been on the list before, you know what I mean? But I think it could work there. It's got that geography element, you know what I mean? It's not in that belt, I would say, that wouldn't work. You mean it's high enough north where maybe it could work.
The only thing I can bring about it is, like we just said, the Seattle team is going to start play in 2
Yeah.
years. So I mean,
There might be enough already in the Cascades
yes.
with Vancouver too. So
I think it could work, not now,
later.
but once that Seattle team is settled in, I'd say like give it like 5 or 6 years maybe. I could definitely see a team in Portland just because hockey's a lot bigger in Portland, and I feel like there's room for 2 hockey teams up in the Northwest. And the people in Portland have access to play hockey more than your average American city, I'd even argue.
Well, because Portland is, like we already said, there's a barrier to entry with hockey. You know what I mean? And Portland is, frankly, a wealthier city than most others. You know?
Portland fits the bill.
Yeah. And also, on top of that, they already have a venue. The Trailblazers. You know what I mean?
They really do already have a venue.
Yeah. hypothetically.
I mean, you could also even go outside of that and look if you're looking for a sponsorship. I mean, the Nike headquarters is right there, so I mean, like they have the means right there to have a sponsor right out of the gate if they want to sponsor a hometown team.
And Nike might want to look into. Nike doesn't have a strong presence at all, if
In
any
hockey,
presence in hockey, and that would be an excellent opportunity for Nike. So I could see Nike definitely supporting it.
So this
honestly.
could be even bigger than just a team.
Exactly.
No, it could send waves through the entire sports industry. Honestly.
Yeah. So a few years ago, well, not a few years ago, about a year ago now, I did do an expansion hockey survey of people that I just put out there on the internet and see what came back. Portland was the number one requested place. At this point, like about a year ago, the Seattle team was still in works, so like they hadn't said yes or no between if they're going to have the Seattle team. So that was, with that being said, I mean it was a little bit more skewed, but definitely Portland came out on top by a big margin in my survey as a team that would be there, and I already have the name for them. I mean I put the name option on there too, and what came back was the Pioneers, the Portland Pioneers.
That works. Nice.
I even did it in NHL, but
Hopefully they'd find more success than your NHL.
yeah,
franchise.
it's pretty bad. But anyways, so the Portland Pioneers is what I would call them. I call them that. Just we're talking about that because that's what came back, and that's. I mean, I have some facts to back that up. Now I have a chart that shows that, and that would be the best. Yeah, I think it could fit very well in Portland. The only thing I worry about is you have to wait until that Seattle team gets
There's a time. There's a time
solidified. Yeah. And there is one other team that was in my survey that I see on your list. We'll talk about it when we get to it.
All right.
Anything else about Portland?
Love it. That's it.
Next up, Milwaukee.
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, Midwest, Great Lakes. You mean hockey? You mean hockey culture there in that area, and there's already a venue there with the Bucks. You know what I mean? Yeah, there's already teams in Minneapolis and Chicago, but why not Milwaukee? You mean?
I love it. I love it. Okay, basically, the thing that you have to think about with hockey is culture first and foremost. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, a lot of people who don't pay attention to hockey love to go to hockey games just because the atmosphere of hockey games is... I think it's unlike any other sport, if I'm being completely honest, because it's rowdy, it's faster paced than any other game that exists of the Big Four in the United States. And, so you have that appeal, of course, of people who just want to go and see a hockey game. But, people in Milwaukee play hockey.
Yeah.
and I think that people who play hockey are those are the people that are going to be your season ticket holders, are the people who've more often than not played hockey and understand the sport to the extent that it needs to be understood for a season ticket holder. So I think Milwaukee is important, and season ticket holders are one of the most important things when deciding where to build a team.
Yeah, I think Milwaukee would be great. You have a little bit of a Tri-Cities rivalry starting there.
That and it would complete the Midwestern kind of...
That's what I'm saying, the Tri-City rivalry. 3, you have Milwaukee, Minneapolis.
And then you already have
Chicago.
Detroit in there, and Detroit, they do well.
Everyone loves to hate the Detroit Red Wings.
Yeah.
So.
And
They're
then,
not good.
obviously, Columbus, too. You know what I mean? And I guess that, if there's nothing left to say about Milwaukee, that brings us into our next team, Indianapolis.
So I will start out in saying that this was the other team that came back second in my survey, Indianapolis. The name was the Indianapolis Racers, which makes it's kind of like the Pacers, but it's the Racers.
Pacers and Racers playing at the stadium.
Yeah. Which, I mean, could be a very big drawing for the fans of, like, it's the Pacers and the Racers. Like, it's pretty close to the same thing. So,
Sounds
I mean,
fun.
Yeah, so that's just what I want to put that out first and foremost before you say what you think, why you think Indianapolis. It was the second place for my survey.
Well, again, you have the venue.
Yep.
You have the culture. Midwest, is into hockey. So there's the culture, there's the venue. You know what I mean? There's the support. Indianapolis supports their teams. You know what I mean? They support the Colts. They support the Pacers. They're not fair weather fans. You know what I mean? Yeah. But so you got Chicago, you got Columbus, you got St. Louis, but no one in Indianapolis. You know what I mean? It's kind of like Alabama with football. You know what I mean? You got so many teams that are so far away, but they're just not close enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Give them their own. You know what I mean?
I definitely think Indianapolis could be a great place too.
Is there any other places that you got on there? Or?
Not off the top of my
So,
head.
so
Maybe
we're ranking them?
Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
Buffalo.
He's already
Yeah,
at Team Buffalo.
Yeah, sorry.
So
my
we'll
bad.
cut that. So if I had to put these in order, I'm gonna go a little bit different on this one. I'm gonna say Milwaukee,
Okay.
number one, because I think that, I feel like they could put the Quebec team in at any time, but I think Milwaukee is important if you want to get an Indiana team. Just,
Okay.
because it's already there and you can get a seamless fit. Plus, it's not like Portland where you have to wait for the Seattle team to be settled in. You could go, I guess if you're going to put them like in an order of that you should build them, you should go Milwaukee first. You should go Quebec. By that time, Portland would be ready for a team. And by that time, Indiana would be ready for a team. And you could get, I think this is the only list so far that I think you can easily build all 4 of these teams into the NHL.
And I think it would be,
be successful.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Not only would it be, not only could you build these 4 teams in, but they would also add to the NHL. I think it'd be good. Because everyone loves hockey, why not add 4 more teams? Huh?
I love hockey.
I know it's great.
I like hockey.
Yep.
So yeah, these are all bangers.
Do you guys have any ideas for?
No, I think that's good.
I guess actually interesting. What else was on that list that you made? That survey.
San Antonio.
San Antonio.
I got no response. So I had 5. So
If there was going to be another team in Texas, I think it'd have to be Houston.
Yeah.
Well, I just threw it out there. So San Antonio was my other team on there. So I had San Antonio, Portland, Indianapolis, OKC, and Nashville. Well, not Nashville. Wait, Memphis, I think. One of the Midwest teams there. But
I don't think.
I honestly
hockey
think the
can
Predators would have done better if they went to Memphis instead of Nashville.
anyway, so yeah, that was.
But they wouldn't move now. But you know what I'm saying.
But the only 2 that actually made any, if you watch the graph, it's a much bigger thing for Portland and then Indianapolis.
I just wanted to see what you found. Maybe I didn't think of something. You mean?
No,
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw some out there, yeah. But
All right. You guys want to get into MLB?
yeah, we can go to MLB real fast. John, give us your opinions on the MLB.
I frankly don't think there's much room for expansion in the MLB. I think it's a hard sport to get into. It's not very. I don't think it's as accessible as football and basketball. It's probably about as accessible as hockey. And I think it just doesn't do well. Anywhere where baseball would do well, it already is.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So baseball, obviously, it's called America's pastime for a reason. I think we can see it's been around it's the longest tenured sport in America, and we can see that based on where they are now is probably the best places they can be in. So I would agree with you in the fact that I don't think there's many places for them to expand, maybe with the exception of Omaha, because they have the College World Series there and everyone loves the College World Series and they have the venues already made for it. I think it's the only place I could see it having another professional team in.
I can say off the top of my head, possibly Las Vegas. You mean?
Yeah,
I think that would be a relocation thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Omaha's a great fit.
Yeah.
Jesse and I actually had a professor who worked for a minor league baseball team. Back when he worked in minor league baseball, it was in Nebraska. I think it was in Lincoln, not Omaha, but it was successful. They got butts in the seats, and that's the most important thing. If I was going to say one other place that might work for a baseball team, just because of culture and kind of flexibility with the schedule, would probably be Salt Lake City.
That's actually I was maybe thinking about that. Too.
I feel like the demographics as far as baseball fans go is like perfect for Salt Lake City. It's affordable, and if you're talking about, Salt Lake City, baseball's a great game to take a family out to.
Oh yeah,
and it's way affordable.
It's
too.
a day activity. It's an event.
Yeah, take me out to the ball game, and I think Salt Lake City would be a perfect place for an MLB team. Once again, I think that it would be better to move a team that maybe isn't doing so well somewhere else,
Then
like
expanding.
Miami or something.
than expanding.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez, or the Rays, honestly. But both the Florida teams don't really do that well.
I don't think baseball does well in the South either. I think the only thing that does well in the South is football. You know what I mean?
One thing I do want to say about moving a baseball team anywhere is it's just different from every other professional sport. Well, besides when we talk about hockey, basketball, and football, in the fact that each team has at least 4 minor league teams. So every single city that you can think of has a minor league baseball team in it, pretty much.
Well, yeah, Colorado Springs has one. Where
Yes.
I'm from.
So if you think about it, it doesn't matter where you think, there's a baseball team there, and it's a professional baseball team. Sure, it's the minor leagues, but it's still affiliated with a professional baseball team. And so if we do a quick math, you're the mathematician here, John. There's 30 30 MLB teams, and each one has 4 to 5 minor league teams. How many is that?
38 times 4.
30 times 4.
30 times 4? Oh, 120.
Okay, so there's 120 professional baseball teams around the United States.
Yeah.
So I think that's, again, why you don't expand another professional baseball team. Because like I said, there's baseball everywhere. Like we just did the math, 120 teams that are considered quote-unquote major league, well, not professional baseball teams. And so I don't think adding teams anywhere would help because, like you said, it's a family activity. And families pretty much all over America, if they want to go to a baseball game with their family, can go to a baseball game, whether it's a minor league team or a professional league team. Or like a major league team, I should say.
I mean, another thing that we could look at is successful minor league teams. So I think that a place like Oklahoma City wouldn't be that bad of a place to have a Major League Baseball team just because their minor league team, attendance-wise, is really successful. So, and they have had, and that's at all levels that they've had minor league teams throughout the years because minor league teams, they go up and go down way more often than anything else, especially like single A teams. They might be around for like a season sometimes.
Yep.
But
you also got to think too, if you're going to add a professional league team, like a major league team, you're going to have to add minor league teams too. So that's a lot more logistic wise based on how many players are in an organization.
But yeah, I think moving is definitely better than expanding.
Yeah, I just don't know where you could put another team.
So, but yeah, I think that does it for the expansion episode of the cycle.
Yeah, we'd like to thank our special guest John Walsh for
Oh, you're welcome.
for joining us today to talk about this thing when our sports world is dwindled still. So we appreciate you spending the time to come join us on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I mean, yeah, you know me. I just like to talk about random crap.
Thanks for coming on, and thank you, audience, for tuning in. I'm Cody Stauffer.
I'm Jesse Booten.
I'm Simon Villalobos.
And we'll see you next time. Tune in for episode 29 of The Cycle. We will be doing our mock draft, mock NFL draft, because that is still going to happen. The draft is still going to happen, and we will go through me, Simon, and Cody's picks and of the first 2 rounds and what we think will happen the week after. So thanks.
Yep.
See you next time.